Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Rewritten Chapter 5. Knowledge. The trip back to Water 7 was spent with Naruto conversing with the Straw Hat crew. It had taken him several tries to explain to them that his abilities weren't the result of some type of devil fruit. Then he had to make up some story to explain just how he learned to use chakra. And then, after 5 years meditating with no food or water at the top of the mountain, I was blessed by the sacred mountain goat people. Naruto finished his tale, doing his utmost to keep his face straight. Wow, that's so cool, Chopper exclaimed, eyes alight with stars. Looking around at the looks of awe on Luffy, Chopper and Usopp's faces, Naruto's sweat dropped. How gullible can they be? With the blonde's silly tale complete, Zoro decided to ask something that had been bugging him for a while, before the blonde started on another silly story. Hey Naruto, Zoro began, drawing the blonde's attention. What was that you did back there, the thing with Lucci? The others perked up at that, they'd been wondering the same thing. Oh, that's, Naruto began, grinning wide as they all leaned in. A secret. The crow shook as its passengers all face planted at the same time, causing Naruto to break out in laughter. He was really having fun with these guys. For the first time in a long while, he could hang around people that didn't hate him or try to belittle him with each sentence. It was a nice change of pace. So the flight went on, with Naruto and the Straw Hats talking and exchanging stories. Even though he already read about most of their adventures, it was still fun to listen to everyone talk. They landed on Water 7 an hour later, Naruto dropping his passengers and the ship off on Crap Island and dispelling his summon. Well, it's been fun guys, but I have somewhere else to be, take care, Naruto announced. He immediately found himself latched onto by a crying Luffy and Chopper. No, you can't go yet Naruto, join my crew, Luffy bawled, much to the embarrassment of his crew. We can have loads of adventures. Wish I could Luffy, I really do, but I still have things I need to do on my own, Naruto replied, smiling sadly. Maybe I'll come back and visit you guys sometime, okay? We understand, Nami smiled, assisting Robin as they tried to pry the two off of him. Maybe we'll meet again. Saying his goodbyes, Naruto turned and took off, running across the ocean, much to the awe of the others. As he left Water 7, he could feel some sort of voice at the back of his mind, a voice that was telling him which way to go. This, he assumed, was the help from Davy Jones. For the next 4 days, Naruto would run across the ocean during the daytime in order to build up his reserves and control, which was made harder because he only had a limited amount of chakra to use due to his limiter seals. Once he ran low on available chakra, he would release a level of the seal in order to summon some sort of sea creature to ride on, usually a whale or a giant turtle. He would then spend an hour or two resting before summoning clones to work on more chakra exercises while he did a few physical exercises like push-ups, sit-ups and laps on whatever creature he was on. He continued like this for several days before he decided he was ready to absorb what he'd sucked out of Rob Lucci. Concentrating on his vortexes, Naruto commanded them to break down all the information and power he'd absorbed and merge it with his body. The first difference he noticed was with his body. His muscles seemed to bulge out and expand for several seconds before they contracted back to normal, his body returning to its regular appearance. Still, the increase in strength remained despite the lack of physical change. The next change was with his chakra reserves. Unfortunately, it wasn't much of an increase, mostly because the beings of this world didn't use any form of energy, so he'd only been able to absorb and convert an average academy student's worth of power from Lucci. Still, energy wasn't what he was after from Lucci. No, that came next. What he wanted were Lucci's memories and knowledge. He grinned as he felt the memories flood into his mind. There was a slight headache from the new information being downloaded into his mind, but compared to using shadow clones to read and train, this was insignificant. As soon as the absorption was complete, Naruto felt an unexplainable anger and need to fight rising. Recognizing them as emotions from Lucci, he immediately pushed them down, forcing the emotions as far back as he could. He could still feel the anger simmering at the back of his mind. It was easy to keep it contained, but it was still there. Seems like I not only get their memories but also their strongest emotion and personality traits, Naruto pondered, rubbing his chin in thought. I'll need to be watchful after each absorption or I'll risk losing control, just like with the Kyuubi's chakra. Sitting down on the back of his summon for the night, a giant sea serpent with the first level of the Uyugan in its eyes, Naruto dropped into his mindscape and made his way over to Jubi's cage. Rather than the large golden cage he was used to seeing, there was now a giant bookcase spanning the entire wall and reaching high into the sky, with hundreds of books on each shelf, all of them with the same blank, white covers. As he watched, one of the books turned a dark yellow in color and the words, Rob Lucci, appeared on the binding in black ink. Taking the book from the shelf, Naruto spent the rest of the night leafing through Lucci's memories, discarding the ones he found useless while keeping those he wanted, namely information on the Rokushiki style. Unfortunately, he found that he couldn't rid himself of all the strong emotions and personality traits that came with the absorption, a pity. The next 2 days were spent on the back of a summon, working on the Rokushiki style and fitting it to his body build since he was built differently from Lucci. 6 days after leaving the Straw Hat crew, Naruto arrived on Banaro Island just as a giant ball of fire crashed into a cloud of darkness. Huh, guess they already started without me. Naruto chuckled mentally. Making his way towards the fight, he got there just in time to see Fire Fist, Ace pass out, the large form of Blackbeard approaching the Mont's body with a knife. Well, Blackbeard chuckled, his deep tones booming across the area. I guess this is where the chase ends, Commander Ace. With that he raised his blade, preparing to bring it down on the back of his helpless opponent. Storm leg, a voice called out, resounding with power. A crescent-shaped blade of air flew towards Blackbeard, striking him square in the back and blowing him away, causing him to land several meters away with a painful thud. The other 4 members and horse of the Blackbeard pirates perked up, their heads snapping over to the source of the attack, a smirking blonde with his right leg extended upwards. Hey, shouted Jesus Burgess, helmsman of the Blackbeard pirates. Who the hell do you think you are? Don't you guys read the paper? Blackbeard growled, shakily making his way to his feet. His back was a bit sore but he was otherwise unharmed. That's Diamond Eyes, Uzumaki Naruto. He's got a bounty of 120 million belly for helping the Straw Hats escape Eni's lobby. It seems like I need to practice the technique some more. That should have cut right through him. Naruto mused, frowning minutely. Marshal D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard. Naruto began, lowering his leg and shifting into a loose fighting stance. I'm here for your head. Gahahahaha. Teach laughed, his crew joining in a few moments later. Is that so? I just defeated one of the top commanders of Whitebeard's crew. What makes you think you can do any better? Taking a step forward, the large pirate swept a hand over his crew. Say you do somehow manage to beat me, you don't stand a chance against my crew. Why don't you just turn around and leave us be? Glancing at each crew member, their faces twisted by devious smirks, Naruto spoke. I don't think I can beat you, Teach. With a blur of movement, he vanished, utilizing the Rokushiki's shave technique, and reappeared in front of Blackbeard. I know I can. Before the pirate could react, Naruto delivered a punch, one powered by the combined strength of both he and Lucci, right into Blackbeard's gut. The blow sent the man flying several meters back, directly into his crew, who tried to catch him but all found themselves sliding back several inches. Blackbeard yelped in pain, dropping to one knee. Quite the punch he's got, Captain. Lafitte, Blackbeard's navigator, chuckled. Yeah, Blackbeard gasped, rubbing his sore gut. I must still be tired from fighting Fire Fist. Lend me a hand with this, guys. Nodding to each other, the 5 men sprang apart at once, each taking their assumed form of combat. Lafitte sprouted wings, long white angelic wings, and took off into the air, his cane in one hand and a pistol in the other. Jesus Burgess and Blackbeard pulled out a pair of pistols each, while Doc Q hefted his scythe and Van Augur jumped to the top of a nearby pile of rubble, taking careful aim with his rifle. Smirking confidently, Naruto activated the second level of his Uyugan and slipped back into his fighting stance, prepared to move at a moment's notice. Guess it's time to see how much I've improved. With an unseen signal, the 4 gunmen opened fire, all focused on one spot. Using his telekinetic ability, Naruto threw up a psychic shield with a snap of his wrist, causing the bullets to smoothly curve around him. With that, He took off running towards the group, his movements blurring as he picked up speed. Up in the air, Lafitte holstered his pistol and hefted his cane, hovering mid-air as he sought an opening. Atop his junk pile, Van continued firing bullets at Naruto with his sniper rifle, causing the blonde to slow as the bullets struck his shield. As Naruto closed the distance, Doc Q ran to meet him, his scythe raised high in the air behind him. As the scythe came swinging down, Naruto leapt into the air, leaping over both the scythe and its wielder with ease. Landing behind the shocked doctor, he spun around and lashed out with a powerful kick to the back, one that sent the man flying. As Doc flew off across the landscape, Naruto ducked down, narrowly dodging a left hook from Jesus. He spun fluidly once more, a chakra-reinforced fist lashing out and impacting with his opponent's torso, him flying in the opposite direction of Doc Q. Without a moment's pause, Naruto flowed from his punching position into a roll, bullets peppering the spot where he once stood. Leaping to his feet, Naruto was forced to lean back quickly, barely avoiding a powerful uppercut from Blackbeard. The large pirate recovered quickly, despite his size, and followed up with several more punches, to no effect. With his Uyagen activated, Naruto could easily see the blows coming, allowing him to dodge them easily with an application of the paper drawing technique. This left him open, however, giving Lafitte an opening to strike, which the man capitalized on. However, as the man approached, Naruto picked up the sound of his wings flapping, giving him a chance to react. Avoiding another punch, Naruto grabbed onto Blackbeard's arm and jumped up onto the man's shoulders, using him as a springboard to leap over the approaching Lafitte. A fast kick while sailing through the air sent the winged pirate falling to the ground, crashing into Blackbeard and sending them both tumbling head over heels. Landing on his feet, Naruto deflected more bullets with his shield before waving his hand and sending a burst of psychic energy in Van's direction, which caused the man's rifle to fly out of his hands and land several feet away. "Shave!" the blonde shouted, vanishing from his spot and reappearing in front of Van, his right arm pulled back and his index finger extended. Finger gun. With lightning-fast movements, he struck out and jabbed his finger right into Van's left shoulder joint, piercing through the skin, bone and cartilage. "Yua!" screamed the sniper, his arm hanging limply at his side, causing Naruto to grin darkly. He could feel Lucci's bloodlust slipping out the more he fought, and he couldn't deny that he liked the feeling. Jumping off the mountain of rubble, Naruto turned around and surveyed the damage he'd caused, his teeth bared in a wide grin. Doc Q and Jesus were just rising from his enhanced blows. Lafitte and Teach were also making their way to there, but Van would most likely be out of the fight without his other arm, so Naruto dropped his shield. Unfortunately, he sensed a presence beside him at that exact moment, the moment he was no longer protected. Turning quickly, his eyes widened as he was immediately sucker punched, well kicked, by Doc's horse. Flying across the battlefield, the blonde grunted as he came to a painful stop at Doc's feet, the man wasting no time in swinging his scythe down at Naruto's chest. Rolling to the side, Naruto was able to avoid a fatal strike, losing his left arm in the process. Seeing this, the rest of the Blackbeard crew smirked, their confidence bolstered at landing such a critical blow on such a domineering opponent. Sneering at the kneeling blonde, who had rolled over and was looking at the stump where his arm once was, Blackbeard spoke. "Well, I'll congratulate you for lasting this long against us, kid, but you've lost. You won't last long without your arm." Staring back at the large pirate, Naruto cocked his head to the side as if contemplating the idea, his face blank for several seconds before he grinned widely. "Nope." Standing up, the blonde stopped concentrating on slowing his healing and allowed his healing factor to do its job, laughing inwardly at the look on his opponent's faces as his arm regrew in a matter of seconds. "What the hell?" raged Jesus, eyes wide in shock. "What kind of devil fruit power is that?" "None," Naruto replied, flexing and testing his new arm. "This is all me." "That's impossible," Doc shouted, his eyes narrowing in thought. "Believe what you want. Are we going to fight or what?" Naruto asked, rolling his arm. "Time to end this, guys. Get over here," Blackbeard ordered, hiding his shock behind a mask of anger. The rest of his crew dashed over to his position, falling in behind him as a pitch-black aura began to surround their captain. Holding his hand towards Naruto, Blackbeard drew on his fruit's powers and focused. Black spiral. Feeling a powerful tug on his body, Naruto suddenly found himself flying towards Blackbeard, pulled along by an invisible force. With a blur of movement, the large form of Jesus dashed past his captain, his fist plowing into Naruto's face and smashing him into the ground, causing a large crater to form around his body. Grinning victoriously, Blackbeard stalked over to the blonde and picked him up by the throat, his chest rising and falling in laughter. "My fruit gives me control over darkness and gravity," the pirate began, a black aura rising around his hand. "It also allows me to nullify all other fruit abilities with a single touch. I don't know what fruit you ate, but let's see how you heal without it." Nodding to Doc, who raised his scythe, and Lafitte, who unsheathed a blade from within his cane, Blackbeard held the blonde up. They struck together, slicing off Naruto's limbs and bisecting him horizontally at the waist, the blonde grinning at Blackbeard the entire time. Before they could even lower their weapons, all of the blonde's limbs regrew, his clothing included, much to the shock of the Blackbeard crew. Laughing at the look on their faces, Naruto grinned as he spoke. "You can't beat me, Blackbeard, you may as well just give up, this is getting boring." The crew all stumbled back, looking at him with wide, fearful eyes. What A or why you?" Van stuttered out, his horse sharing the same shocked look. Changing his eyes to their final form, a red diamond on a black background, Naruto replied. "Me, I'm complicated." Focusing on another of his powers, Naruto narrowed his eyes and concentrated, grasping at the electrical signals passing through his opponent's bodies. "Kneel." As soon as he gave the command, he reached out and shut down their motor skills, causing them all to fall to their knees. This was mostly done for the shock and awe factor, a spike of Lucci's bloodlust adding a shot of excitement to the whole thing. Could see the fear in their eyes, hell, he could even smell it rolling off of them. "Time to die, teach." Naruto chuckled, grabbing two of his discarded limbs off the ground, using his shapeshifting powers to fuse them together and forming a large executioner's axe. "Any final words?" Wait, why don't you join my crew? With your powers and mine we can rule," Teach began, only to be cut off as Naruto swung the axe, taking off the top half of his head. "Too wordy." Naruto deadpanned as the body fell to the ground. Looking into the eyes of the remaining members, Naruto smirked. He liked seeing the fear in their eyes. With that single glance, he captured them all with his powers, their eyes glazing over as he hypnotized them. "Take Fire Fist Ace to Water 7 and hand him over to the Straw Hat Pirates," he ordered, Tall Three nodding as they complied. "Let them know who saved Ace and give them my greetings, also tell them that I hope to see them again someday. After leaving Water 7, you can continue with your lives." "Yes, Naruto-sama," they all replied in an emotionless tone, their voices resounding as they spoke as one. Standing, they made their way over to Ace and picked him up, slowly leaving to carry out the blonde's orders. Looking down at Blackbeard's body, Naruto scoffed and knelt, his hands hovering over the pirate's head. Just like with Lucci, a stream of blood flowed into one vortex while a black light flowed into the other. Unlike last time, however, instead of holding onto the samples, Naruto immediately broke them down and absorbed them into his body. Seconds later his body seemed to swell to 3 times its normal size, muscles bulging and straining, before shrinking back down to normal. As with Lucci, the energy absorbed was minuscule in value, but he gained a much larger physical increase from Blackbeard. Where Lucci was built for quick movement and fast strikes, Blackbeard was all about strength and endurance. Naruto could feel his body becoming stronger and stronger by the second. Ignoring the headache from the added memories, Naruto immediately fought down the feelings of greed and extreme thirst of adventure he got from Blackbeard, pushing them all aside as he dropped into his mindscape. He appeared before the bookcase, noticing that another one of the books had been colored in, this time in black with gray text on the binding. Taking the book down, he began the process of erasing all unneeded memories, finding that by getting rid of a large amount of memories, he was able to lessen the emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. Once finished, Naruto stretched out his new muscles while reviewing the fight, the entire battle playing over and over in his mind. "I'll admit that I've gotten much stronger, those were some of the strongest men this world has to offer. That doesn't mean I'm the best though, not yet anyways. I'll need to keep working towards my goal." Taking a final glance around, he began pouring chakra into the ring on his hand, preparing to leave this universe behind. "I should see if I can come back here sometime, the Straw Hats make such good friends. In a flash of red light, he was gone. Arriving back in the familiar halls of the multiverse, Naruto turned to the door before him, this one completely different from the last two. While the last two doors were made of wood, this door seemed to be made of two large stone tablets with a mural engraved onto their surface. Embedded in the center of each door was a small red stone, roughly the size of an apple, with what appeared to be millions and millions of faces writhing in agony within the stone. That definitely sent a shiver up his spine. Now that's just creepy. Wonder what world this is. Looking to the plaque, the blonde smirked as he read it. Fullmetal Alchemist Universe. Number of realms. 2506. This caused him to whistle. Damn. That's a lot of separate worlds, I wonder why there's so many. Patron gods. Truth, Ishvala, Leto. Alright, time to go in. Naruto decided, reaching over and grabbing the door. Maybe if I ask nicely, I can get what I need without having to visit a bunch of realms. In one quick movement, he opened the door and stepped inside, prepared for anything. Within the room, Naruto was met with nothing, absolutely nothing at all. All around him, as far as his eyes could see, there was nothing. The room he entered was an endless white expanse, no doors, no people, nothing at all. Well, this is boring. He deadpanned. I quite agree. The voice came from directly behind him, causing Naruto to spin around, slipping into a defensive stance. Instead of seeing the doorway he'd just entered from, Naruto was met with the same white expanse extending behind, except there were three figures standing before him. Who are you? He asked, keeping his tone polite as he reminded himself that these were gods. I am Ishvala, god of creation, spoke the figure on the right. He was a man roughly in his mid-30s, taller than Naruto by a good 3 inches, with a skinny but muscular frame. His eyes were a bright red in color, his skin a dark brown, causing his neck-length silver hair to really stand out. He was dressed in a plain black, high-collared, long-sleeved shirt, with baggy, black pants and sandals. Over top of his shirt, he wore a sash going from his right shoulder to his left hip and back around. The sash was yellow in color with 3 black lines vertically running around the entire thing. I am Leto, the sun god. The second figure, now identified as Leto, replied. This one was an old man, but while his face was old and wrinkled, he had the body of a weightlifter, thick and muscular. He stood straight, reaching almost 7 feet in height, with pitch black eyes and a fair complexion. His head was entirely bald, with a long black beard and what looked like a metal, spiky circlet on top. For clothing, he was dressed in a simple gray sleeveless robe, bound at the waist by a golden braid of rope with brown sandals on his feet. In his left hand was a large wooden staff with a large yellow, metal sun attached to the top. With his height and stern look, he made quite an imposing figure. And I'm Truth, guardian of the gate, the final figure commented. As it turned out, Truth was the weirdest looking of the lot, more so than his companions. He was completely white in color, with absolutely no features at all, just plain white. He would have blended right in with the background had it not been for the small black aura that encircled him and gave him shape. He stood at roughly 4 feet tall. On closer inspection, one could just barely make out a large gleaming smile on Truth's face. It's an honor to meet you. I am Uzumaki Naruto. He greeted with a bow, remembering to be polite. What is it you seek within our realm, Uzumaki Naruto? Ishvala asked with a sneer, his face twisted in disdain. I come seeking information on alchemy, Lord Ishvala. Naruto replied, remaining bowed. Truth's smile seemed to grow even larger while Leto frowned and Ishvala scoffed. Another one of yours, Truth. Ishvala grunted, he and Leto turning to walk away. Glancing over at Truth, Naruto gave him a questioning look. They're just upset that everyone that comes through here always seems to be after information on alchemy. Truth explained, his grin never fading even as he spoke. Since that's my domain, I get to handle them all. Ah, Naruto replied, not understanding at all. Tell me, Uzumaki Naruto, Truth continued, head cocked to the side. Why do you seek this information? From what I can tell, the people of your realm are unable to use alchemy. I don't seek information on alchemy per se, Naruto replied, carefully choosing his words. You see, I have an ability that allows me to manipulate my form and physical makeup. What I seek is information on the atomic and molecular makeup of all objects. Without that information, I'm limited in what materials I can shift my body into. My realm is less advanced than yours, so any information there on the subject is limited. Ah, I see, Truth chuckled, his grin threatening to split his face as he raised a hand. Very well, I will give you what you seek, Uzumaki Naruto, that is, if you can handle it. Hearing a sound from behind, Naruto spun around, only to see a much larger version of this universe's door appear from thin air. With an ominous creak, the door slowly slid open, revealing a black void suspended between the two stone slabs. He could see many shadows moving about within the doorway, shapeless beings scurrying about, causing ripples in the darkness of the void. All of a sudden the void seemed to split apart, a giant gray eye appearing in the tear and staring down at the blonde teen. Staring back in shock, Naruto realized that he could hear what sounded like thousands of voices whispering within the void, a loud hiss with no identifiable words. Stumbling back in shock, he was caught off guard as dozens of small, shadowy hands leapt from the void, latching onto him and slowly dragging him forward. He tried his best to fight them off, struggling with all his might and calling on his many abilities, but nothing seemed to work. The shadowy limbs seemed to be indestructible. With a frantic shout, Naruto found himself torn off his feet and pulled into the void, the doors slamming shut behind him. I wish you luck, Uzumaki Naruto. Truth chuckled, grin lessening minutely. Knowledge is power and all power has its costs. What are you willing to lose in order to gain what you seek? Within the void, Naruto moaned as he felt tremendous amounts of information flood into his mind, all pouring in without pause. The pain was unimaginable, pure, unfiltered knowledge being inserted into his mind, knowledge about a great many subjects. Having some experience with his clones and information overload, he was able to resist the effects at first. However, the sheer amounts of information flooding in was just too much to limit, threatening to destroy his mind. Shortly after the mental pain began, Naruto was struck with extreme physical pain, his body being torn apart at the microscopic level. As more and more knowledge was forced into his mind, he could feel more and more of his body breaking down and flowing away into the void, being drained away by the beings within. Yet as quickly as he broke down, he felt his healing factor repairing the damage, his very cells regrowing by the second. He'd tried many times to retreat into his mindscape, hoping to escape and somehow lessen the pain, but he couldn't focus long enough to consciously do so, and something seemed to be keeping him conscious despite the pain he win. After what felt like ages of breaking down and healing over and over again, the pain began to lessen, the flood of knowledge slowing steadily before coming to a complete stop. Painfully cracking an eye open, the blonde groaned as he realized that he was still within the void, still held within the tight grips of the shadowy appendages. Moments passed with no change before the blonde noticed something different. There was a vertical line of white light shining through the dark, a light that was slowly growing in size by the second. The line grew and grew until he soon found himself staring out at the white expanse of the god's realm, the gate opening fully and the shadow hands releasing their grip, the blonde managing to stumble 3 steps past the gate before collapsing, unconscious before he hit the ground. So you survived after all. Truth chuckled, stalking over to the unconscious teen. You were an interesting one, Uzumaki Naruto. Within his mindscape, Naruto looked on with shock, trying to comprehend the sheer amount of damage that had just been inflicted on his mind. The walls of his mindscape were all covered in slowly healing cracks, many parts had whole chunks of stone missing, the walls close to complete destruction. Shuddering at how close he'd come to breaking, the blonde made his way towards the bookcase, which was now covered in a rainbow of colorful books. The entire wall was like one giant rainbow, books of all colors and sizes filling the shelf, each filled with a different tidbit of information. Sighing in exasperation, Naruto willed 10 clones into existence beside, requiring their assistance in the sorting of his newfound knowledge. What is it with all of the gods I meet trying to kill me? He pondered, beginning his work. After a full day of rest and work within his mindscape, Naruto awoke to the blinding whiteness of the god's realm. Well, look who's finally woken up. For a second there, I thought you'd been reduced to a mindless husk. Turning to his right, Naruto groaned deeply as he saw Truth looking at him, his grin present as always. Rubbing his eyes with one hand, Naruto stood from the floor. What happened in there? He asked, keeping his tone polite despite the annoyance he felt with the god before him. I expected the mental damage from the information overload, but what was the physical pain? It felt like my entire body was being broken down and absorbed. Truth chuckled at that, his grin widening even further. You should know the rules of alchemy, Uzumaki Naruto. In everything there is equivalent exchange. Nothing is gained without losing something in return, he replied, the amusement missing from his tone. In this case, you gained the combined knowledge of thousands of alchemists. In exchange, the gate stripped you of the combined life force of thousands of people. Not many can enter the gate and exit whole. That regeneration of yours is truly fascinating. Naruto deadpanned at that. You really couldn't have mentioned this beforehand. The grin stretched even wider. Where's the fun in that? Mentally grumbling about annoying gods who need to be taught a lesson, Naruto gripped his head in pain. I'll be taking my leave now. I have many things to do in so little time. Thank you for your assistance with my goals. Truth, he murmured, giving the god a much shallower bow. Don't mention it, Truth replied, turning and walking away. You're an interesting person, Uzumaki Naruto. I'll be keeping an eye on you. Joy, Naruto mumbled, vanishing in a flash of red light. Oh yes, quite interesting indeed. Rewritten Chapter 6, Power. With a flash of red light, Naruto reappeared in the familiar hallway of the multiverse, standing before yet another door, one that was completely different than all previous doors. For one thing, rather than metal or wood, this door seemed to be made out of some sort of yellow-orange substance, one that happened to be completely transparent, although he could only see complete darkness on the other side. This is amber, Naruto realized, his mind automatically providing him with a name for the material he was closely observing, one that he'd never encountered before. With that name came a sudden influx of information, all pertaining to the material making up this door, a material that he previously knew nothing about. With this sudden influx of detailed information came a familiar pain, causing the blonde to hiss and rub his temple, his face scrunched up in a grimace. He couldn't help but curse the entity known as Truth at this particular moment. Maybe knowing everything about everything wasn't such a great idea after all, the blonde winced. Curse your hindsight. Why are you never there when I actually need you? Sighing, the blonde turned his attention back to the slab of amber serving as a door, his keen sight picking up the many red, star-shaped objects embedded into the stone. He counted 28 of them, all placed in a circular pattern around the door handle. Already having some inkling of where this door led, Naruto took a glance at the plaque, grinning as his assumption was proven correct. Dragon Ball Universe. Number of realms, 26. Patron gods, Shenron, Black Smoke Shenron, Ultimate Shenron, Purunga. The Dragon Ball Universe EH. Naruto mused with a wide grin. That's awesome, I'll finally be able to do something with all this ki. He'd already tried many times to practice with both his ki and Raryoku, trying to control the two energies and perform techniques with them. Unfortunately, he was never good with chakra control and jutsu creation. He soon found that without the proper knowledge, ki and Raryoku were quite difficult to control and manipulate, much more than chakra. In fact, using hand signs did absolutely nothing to control these two energies. He would require the proper methods used in the universes where these two energies originated. Still grinning widely, the blonde grasped the door handle and pulled open the large amber slab, stepping through the doorway and into the room without pause. The room he entered was completely designed to look like a cave, an extremely large cave at that. While the floor and walls were made of a dark, rocky substance, the roof above extended upwards indefinitely, seemingly having no end at all. All he could see when looking up was darkness, complete and utter darkness. On closer inspection, Naruto noticed what appeared to be large claw marks covering most of the floor and walls, some looking to have been formed by a claw many times his size. At the other end of the room, directly across from the door Naruto had entered through, there were multiple doors lined up one next to the other, 26 of them in total if he counted right. Hearing something scraping on the ground to his left, Naruto turned quickly and found himself staring into the large crimson eyeball of a massive serpentine dragon. The creature in question was covered from head to toe in large green scales, the only uncovered part being its yellow-brown underbelly, although said underbelly also appeared to be formed of a material that was just as tough as the protective scales. Trailing from the dragon's head, All the way down to its tail was a line of light green spikes, which coupled with its razor-sharp teeth and large red eyes to give it a truly fearsome appearance. Both ninja and dragon stared at each other for several seconds in silence, one glaring fiercely and the other shaking fearfully. Naruto gulped, his heart pounding powerfully, as the mighty beast leaned forward until it was only a few centimeters away from him. Luckily for the blonde shinobi, the dragon simply took a long sniff before backing off, causing Naruto to sigh in relief. Giving an amused-sounding snort, flames leaping from its nostrils, the dragon backed away from the blonde, its body slowly snaking upwards and away, revealing to the blonde that it had slithered down from the darkness above, a portion of its tremendous bulk remaining hidden within the darkness. Looking up once more, Naruto almost jumped out of his skin when he found another 3 sets of glowing eyes observing him, their owners fully hidden in the darkness above. Under the full scrutiny of these 4 mighty beasts, Naruto did the only thing he could think of, he gulped and bowed low. Hello. The blonde squeaked, his eyes returning to the soul dragon whose body he could actually see. While he may consider himself quite powerful, Naruto was no fool. Drawing the ire of a god was one thing, drawing the ire of a dragon god was quite another. In reply, the dragon simply snorted once again before retreating back into the darkness of the cave roof, its eyes dimming and closing as it did so, the other 3 following soon after. Okay, Naruto muttered, scratching his head in confusion. I'll take that as a sign to continue on. Despite his seemingly calm exterior, the blonde was anything but. Damn, that thing was huge. Naruto shouted mentally, eyes perceptibly wide. Hell, it was at least 3 times the size of Jubi and Gamabunta. Taking a deep breath to calm his racing heart, Naruto slowly, as to not draw any more attention from the great beasts above, made his way over to a green door, the closest to his position. Looking to the plague, he frowned as he read the words carved onto its surface. Dragon Ball Realm Number 18, Divergence Point. Goku and Vegeta failed to defeat Majin Buu, resulting in the destruction of many worlds. With a frown on his face, the blonde opened the door and stepped through, only to find himself standing in an enormously large room. The first thing he noticed was the huge mahogany desk in front of him, behind which was seated a massive red man with long black hair, beady, black eyes and a shaggy, black beard. The man was dressed in a purple business suit with a white shirt and orange tie. On top of his head was a purple helmet with 2 horns on the sides. He also happened to be tall as large as Gamabunta, even while sitting, and was staring directly at Naruto. Naruto paled as he realized just who was glaring down at him, King Yema, the judge of the dead. Who the hell are you? Yema growled, his deep voice booming throughout the room. Only the dead should be able to enter this place. Greetings Yema-sama, Naruto replied with a bow, his tone as polite as possible. My name is Uzumaki Naruto and I came here seeking 2 souls. Is that so? Yema asked, brow raised curiously. Who do you seek and why? It's my duty to guard the afterlife and I can't just let anyone that asks stroll around like they own the place. Naruto could almost swear that he heard the large ogre mumble something that sounded like, damn Saiyans, under his breath. Choosing to ignore it, he decided to simply answer Yema's question. I'm not here to cause any trouble or to free anyone Yema-sama. Naruto replied, remaining bowed. I just happen to know that you have Frieza and Vegeta here, I want to fight them. At the sound of the 2 names, Yema's eyes widened comically. You have some kind of death wish, boy. Those are 2 of the strongest beings of locked up in hell. Yes, I know, Naruto replied, his eyes glinting with determination. I still want to fight them. Yema snorted before pointing to the door to his left. Whatever, just another soul for me to judge later. Go through that door and jump off the path, that will take you straight into hell. You'll have to ask around in order to find those 2 though. Thank you Yema-sama, Naruto replied, running towards the door. Yeah, don't mention it. Just try not to bother me when you die. Yema yelled at the blonde's vanishing back. Exiting the check-in station, Naruto found himself standing on Snake Way, a long pathway floating above a plain of golden clouds. Walking to the edge of the pathway, Naruto glanced over the edge and frowned, his sight was completely blocked by the golden clouds. Taking a few steps back, Naruto formed an image in his mind and concentrated, his back cracking and splitting as he shifted. With a spray of blood, A pair of large avian wings burst from his back, the feathers pitch black and glossy. While he had no experience flying, the information he'd gotten from the gate shiver allowed him to make the wings the correct size and strength for someone his size. He also made sure to shift his bones so that they were lighter and hollow, allowing for easier flight. Hopping up and down to loosen up, the blonde gave a few test flaps of his new appendages, finding them to be in perfect working order. Prepared to begin, the blonde took a deep breath before taking a running leap over the edge, his wings catching the wind and slowing his fall. Breaking through the cloud cover, Naruto found himself flying several hundred meters above hell, which looked in no way like how he imagined it. He'd expected fire and brimstone, instead he was met with grassy and rocky, as well sparkling red pools of liquid. Quite frankly, this place looked like the human realm to him, just in different colors and hues. Looking around, he spotted several white clouds floating a few feet above the ground below. These he recognized as souls from the manga he'd read. While a majority of them looked like small white clouds, Naruto noticed that a few souls had kept their original forms, but these were few in number, mostly one for every dozen clouds. The blonde spent over half an hour flying around before he found a soul that he recognized, one that could help him find one of his targets. Turning his skin into a diamond-hard substance, Naruto retracted his wings and dropped down from the sky, hitting the ground so hard that the surrounding area exploded, sending souls flying and forming a deep crater around the blonde. "Hello, Captain Ginyu," Naruto greeted cheerily, stepping out of the crater unharmed. "Who are you?" the soul asked, raising a hairless brow in question. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto, but that is unimportant," Naruto replied, coming to a stop a few meters from the purple-skinned being. "I am seeking two souls within this realm. You're going to tell me where they are?" Ginyu sneered at the blonde's tone, his eyes glinting aggressively. "Why the hell would I tell you anything?" Ginyu asked, his tone arrogant and spiteful. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto stared at Ginyu for a few seconds before he smirked, eyes shining with confidence. Making a cross seal with his hands, the blonde grasped at his chakra, grinning as he felt the raw power flowing through his coils. Shadow clone technique. With a poof of smoke, 50 clones popped into existence around him, causing a few curious souls to back away, forming a large circle around the two fighters. "You'll either help us freely," Naruto spoke, 51 voices speaking as one, "or we'll make you." Ginyu gave a smirk of his own and slipped into an offensive stance, looking completely at ease with the situation. Then again, compared to the powers of the beings inhabiting this universe, the clone technique wasn't all that impressive. "Make me worm," the horned alien chuckled. As one, the 50 clones rushed forward, the original hanging back and observing. In a blur of movement, Ginyu moved, his arms flying and striking out at the first wave of clones. In less than a second, over half of the clones were dispelled, Ginyu proving to be far too fast for them to handle. With the death of their brothers, the remaining blondes absorbed the memories and adapted, easily avoiding blows that had killed them moments ago. As more and more clones died, the ones remaining grew stronger and faster, dodging and counter-attacking with greater and greater ease. Despite this, Ginyu soon found himself standing alone, the last of the clones vanishing in a wisp of smoke. "Is that the best you can do?" Ginyu asked, smirking confidently. Smirking in reply, Naruto simply crossed his fingers once more and drew on his chakra, pouring it into the jutsu. Shadow clone technique. The look on the Ginyu's face as over 500 blondes popped into existence was quite hilarious. Despite the overwhelming odds, Ginyu was quite the formidable opponent, so much so that he was able to take down over half the clones despite their continuously growing advantage. Still, he was but one man against hundreds of skilled warriors. Ginyu soon found himself overwhelmed by the clones, several dozen of them swarming and restraining him. Just as the original Naruto opened his mouth to demand his opponent's surrender, a light purple shockwave exploded through the clones, blasting them away and dispelling them. Holding out his hands, Ginyu began launching ki blasts into the remaining mob of clones, dispelling them by the dozen. With the clones taken care of, Ginyu rushed the original Naruto, moving at high speeds with his horns bared. Luckily for Naruto, high speeds for Ginyu meant low Jonin speeds for the blonde, speeds that he could easily follow with the powers of his Uyagen. With raw chakra rushing through his coils and lightning buzzing around his brain, Heightening his reflexes, Naruto was able to dodge the rampaging Ginyu with some ease. With a quick spin on his heel, the blonde stuck at his opponent's back with a powerful kick, one that was quickly blocked by a recovering Ginyu. Having blocked the incoming blow, Ginyu struck out with a punch, his fist blurring across the distance between them. Narrowly ducking under the blow, Naruto cocked his right arm back and extended his pointer finger. Shifting the finger into a long metallic spike, Naruto struck out at his opponent's chest, the tip of the spike glowing a pale blue. Finger gun. With a loud squelch, the spike pierced right through Ginyu's battle armor and into his chest, missing his heart by a few scant inches. The spirit gasped in pain as a bullet of air and chakra shot through his torso and out his back, traveling for several meters before dispersing. Taking advantage of his opponent's moment of weakness, Naruto withdrew his finger and lashed out with a kick, cracking the battle armor and blasting Ginyu away. Landing several feet away, Ginyu shakily stood, a look of shock clearly stretching across his face. His armor had a hole through the center, several cracks spread across its surface from the blonde's kick. How did he break my armor so easily? Ginyu pondered in shock, his eyes wide with pain. It takes even Lord Frieza a few hits to damage it. Who is this boy? Deciding to play it safe, Ginyu kept his distance as he made his battle plans. He was obviously outmatched in close combat, especially when those clones were taken into advantage. He hasn't used any long-range key techniques yet, Ginyu realized, reviewing the quick battle between him and the blonde. I'll try to keep my distance and catch him off guard. If only I could use my body switch technique, but I don't even have a real body in this place. Ignoring his wounds, Ginyu began powering up his ki, a purplish-pink aura springing to life around him. Sensing his opponent's intent, Naruto dashed forward at his opponent, planning to take advantage of the few seconds it would take for Ginyu to power up. He wasn't fast enough, however. Ginyu was ready far quicker than the blonde expected, his aura dying down as he prepared to strike. Milky Cannon, Ginyu shouted, his arms extended and his palms facing forward, both hands glowing with a white and purple aura. With a loud boom, a beam of pinkish energy flew at Naruto, moving far too quickly to be dodged and struck the blonde square in the chest, causing a massive explosion with the blonde at its center. The explosion lasted for only a moment before fading, leaving a massive crater and dust cloud in its wake, a group of floating souls laying unconscious at its edge. As the dust cleared, Ginyu searched for his opponent with his limited senses, deeply wishing for his scouter at that moment. Finding no sign of the young blonde, he dropped his hands to his sides and straightened, his head turning from side to side. Did I get him? He wondered out loud, sounding a bit surprised. That wasn't enough power to completely vaporize the blonde. No, a voice replied from behind, causing Ginyu to stiffen. Even as he turned, he knew that it was far too late. He was too slow to do anything. There was a spike of pain from his right side and Ginyu glanced down with wide eyes. His entire arm had been torn off at the shoulder, massive amounts of blue blood pouring from his remaining stump. With a tug, he was spun around, Naruto's hand flying up and gripping him by the throat. How did he survive? Ginyu panicked, his eyes darting about frantically. I know that I hit him with that attack, it wouldn't have exploded otherwise. Pushing his frantic thoughts away, he brought his remaining arm forward and fired a ki blast at point blank into Naruto's face, or he tried to at least. No matter how hard he tried to blast the blonde's head off his shoulders, nothing happened. I bet you're wondering why you can't use your ki. Naruto began, grinning at the look of confused terror in his opponent's eyes. One of my abilities allows me to completely nullify an opponent's abilities by simply touching them. As long as I'm holding onto you, you won't be able to use your ki. Grinning at the flash of horror in his opponent's eyes, Naruto loosened his grip and poured more chakra into his eyes, turning the diamond red as it shifted into its third and final stage. Now then, the blonde continued, watching as Ginyu's eyes glazed over. You're going to tell me what I want to know. Hi, Naruto-sama, Ginyu replied in a dull tone. And you're going to provide me with some much-needed knowledge. Naruto continued, the vortexes on his hands glowing as they activated. Hi, Naruto-sama, Ginyu replied once again. Arriving at his first location, Naruto spotted Frieza exactly where Ginyu said he'd be, namely right next to He Bloody Pond. As the name specified, it was a large pond filled with what appeared to be blood, a lot of it. Approaching his target, Naruto spoke, drawing inspiration from his much-hated ex-teammate. "Oi Frieza," he called, tone as arrogant and overbearing as possible. "Fight me." Without even sending a glance in his direction, Frieza raised a hand with his pointer finger extended, the tip glowing with a white and pink energy. Death Beam. The beam of energy flew far faster than Naruto could track, yet a lone move, and pierced right through his heart. Frieza had quite the aim, the blonde noted. "Bastard!" Naruto shouted, resorting to his old attitude in an attempt to further annoy the tailed alien. "You ruined my shirt." This definitely gained Frieza's attention, seeing as he quite expected his opponent to be dead, well deader, since this was hell after all. He glanced over at Naruto and frowned, eyes flashing with annoyance. "Go away, boy, consider yourself lucky to have survived that attack." With that he turned his attention back to the bloody pool, completely ignoring the blonde. Naruto stood there grinding his teeth in annoyance. He could feel Lucci's anger threatening to break free of his mental restraints. How dare this arrogant prick just brush me off like that? Naruto growled mentally, eyes flashing red as he activated his dojutsu. "Gah, he reminds me of that Uchiha bastard." Flashback. "Hey Sakura-chan, want to go on a date later? You know, to celebrate being on the same team?" Naruto asked excitedly, grinning brightly. They had been assigned to their teams an hour ago and were now waiting for their sensei to show up. "Go away, Baka, who would ever want to go on a date with you? Just leave me alone, you're interrupting my time with Sasuke-kun." Sakura shouted, glaring at the blonde before going back to ogling her crush, who proceeded to completely ignore her. Jumping on the desk in front of the Uchiha, Naruto glared at his rival angrily. "I don't see what's so great about you, Tem. Fight me so I can show Sakura-chan that I'm loads better than you." Without even glancing at the blonde, the Uchiha threw out his hand and sucker punched him in the face, sending him crashing to the floor. "Ha, serves that Baka right, you're so cool, Sasuke-kun." Sakura squealed with stars in her eyes. Flashback end. Thinking about the Uchiha brought up more and more memories of his homeworld, and with each passing second, Naruto could feel his anger rising until it felt like he was going to explode, like he could just scream out with rage. As he got angrier and angrier, he could feel his ki flowing faster and faster, brushing up against his skin as if asking to be let out, so Naruto let it go free. Just like Ginyu's memories had provided, ki was intrinsically connected to his emotion, most of all anger and rage. The angrier he got, the stronger and easier to control his ki became. It was a bit like the Kyuubi's chakra in that way, and Naruto was quite experienced with that form of power. Frieza immediately spun around when felt a large spike of power from behind, power that was coming from the blonde-haired boy standing behind him, more power than he would have expected from such a weak-looking child. This boy was quite experienced with keeping his power hidden. One second the kid has less energy than a Saibaman, the next he's surrounded in a dark blue aura of raw power, and from what he could tell, the blonde seemed to have as much power as that Saiyan monkey from Namek. "Gra!" Naruto screamed out in anger, his rage growing as he continued reviewing his memories, continued drawing on his large well of ki. He could feel the power bursting from within him, strengthening every cell it passed through and increasing his power. He also felt his own anger overpower and absorb Lucci's, adding it to his rage and increasing his power further. As he felt the last of his ki leave his reserves and circulate through his body, Naruto looked upon the shocked face of Frieza. "You should feel honored, Frieza. You will be my first test of this power." The blonde chuckled, his mind clear and focused, but the rage and power remaining, his ki serving to focus his mind despite his high emotions. Manipulating the power flowing through him, Naruto formed balls of ki in each hand and began launching them at Frieza, a simple technique picked up from Ginyu's mind. His ki blasts were much slower than Ginyu's due to his lack of experience, which allowed Frieza to easily dodge them. However, they proved to be far more powerful, causing large explosions and leaving behind a few craters. How can he be so powerful at his age? Frieza pondered, staring at his opponent's form. Well, no matter, he is still far weaker and less experienced than I am. I won't lose to some child. As soon as the blonde stopped launching ki blasts, Frieza closed the distance with him and engaged him in close combat, his movements a complete blur. Naruto could feel his body moving much faster and hitting much harder now that his ki had been unlocked, Despite the fact that Frieza was moving much faster than Ginyu had been, Naruto found that he could easily keep up now. He and Frieza were disappearing and reappearing all over the landscape, exchanging powerful blows each time they reappeared, something the blonde would have found impossible to accomplish moments ago. Eventually Naruto was able to land a solid blow on Frieza, a blow that sent the tailed alien flying, right into the side of a mountain. Drawing on his ki once more, Naruto formed a large ball of energy with it, utilizing the knowledge Jiraiya had provided him to form a Rasengan. The ball of power was at least 5 times bigger than his normal Rasengan, spiraling sphere, pure physical energy swirling about in his palm. It was quite inspiring. Spiraling ki sphere. Cocking his hand back, Naruto leapt towards Frieza's form, the alien having dug himself out of the crater he'd formed. Frieza's eyes widened fearfully as he gazed upon the approaching technique, his instincts rising up and forcing him to dodge. It was these instincts that saved Frieza's life, allowing him to quickly dodge and avoid the brunt of the technique, watching with wide eyes as it struck the ground beside him. With a powerful boom, the ki-based Rasengan exploded, destroying much of the surrounding landscape and sending the two fighters flying, much to the shock of both fighters. Oh wow, Naruto gaped, staring at the massive crater created by his technique. That was pretty sweet. I've seen better, a voice shouted, drawing the blonde's attention. Upwards. His eyes snapped up, eyes widening as he saw Frieza's hovering form, his entire body covered in an aura of pinkish-white energy. Oh shit, Naruto muttered, knowing that this did not bode well. Indeed. Frieza chuckled, a confident smirk on his face. Death Comet. The aura flashed, growing a few inches in size, before firing multiple waves of energy at the blonde. Waves that exploded upon contact with the ground, following the blonde as he dashed across the barren landscape. The landscape for miles around was completely destroyed in this ensuing chase, Naruto running as fast as he could manage in order to avoid Frieza's technique. Eventually the blonde's luck ran out, a wave of ki smashing into him, followed by another and another and another. Over and over the blasts slammed into him, each exploding and destroying everything surrounding the blonde. After several seconds, the blast stopped coming, a smirking Frieza making his way to the ground. Smirking into the crater he'd formed, a massive dust cloud hiding much of it from view, Frieza turned back to the bloody pond, his moment of entertainment over. Huh, that was a pretty good attack. A familiar voice spoke, causing Frieza to spin around, eyes widened in shock. With a pulse of power, the dust cloud was dispelled, revealing the unmarred form of Uzumaki Naruto, a wide grin splitting his face. How? Frieza snarled, eyes glowing in anger. How did you survive? Before the blonde could reply, Frieza released an angry scream and struck, fully aiming to eradicate his opponent. His hands flew up as he fired blast after blast of ki at the blonde, who simply remained unmoving, the blasts exploding upon contact, to no effect. Grinning as the energy washed off his impenetrable, diamond skin, Naruto slowly rose off the ground, utilizing both his ki and the Rokushiki's moon step technique to achieve flight without his wings. Once airborne, the blonde launched himself forwards at speeds far faster than before, vanishing from sight and appearing behind Frieza. Dodging the powerful tail that lashed out at his head, Naruto grabbed hold of it and began to spin, dragging Frieza along as he did so. Ignoring his opponent's angry shout, Naruto released his hold and sent his foe flying, grinning wide as Frieza was sent crashing into the side of another mountain. In a burst of speed, the blonde found himself hovering several meters above Frieza's crash site, his entire body shifting into osmium, the densest, heaviest substance known to the alchemist world. With that, he dropped to the ground, smashing into the ground and destroying the entire mountain in the resulting explosion. Returning to normal, Naruto grinned as he took in the purple smear that had once been Frieza. The impact had reduced him into a bloody paste. Oh, the alien wouldn't stay dead for long, he'd reform eventually, this was the afterlife after all. Still, it was enough for Naruto to get just what he wanted. Kneeling next to the largest smear of Frieza, Naruto activated his vortexes for the second time that day and began absorbing, sucking up his opponent's blood and lingering ki. Well, that was quite fun. Naruto chuckled, hopping out of the massive crater, which was already healing and reforming. That was far too easy though, I guess that's what happens when you underestimate your opponent. Then again, with my act at the start, I wouldn't take me seriously either. With a chuckle, the blonde took off into the sky, searching for a nice, secluded area to train. Having claimed what he was after, Naruto spent much of the following week training in a secluded part of Hell, practicing with his ki and mastering his techniques. Using Frieza's knowledge and memories, he was able to not only increase his strength and speed to new levels, but he'd also managed to increase his own energy levels. More so than his absorptions from the One Piece universe had accomplished. The energy he'd absorbed from Frieza and Ginyu had more than doubled his ki reserves and increased his Ryutsu reserves slightly, while the physical power he absorbed wasn't much compared to Lucci's speed and Teach's strength, a majority of this world's physical prowess being tied to their ki levels rather than actual physical fitness. Still, he was quite pleased with what he could do with his ki. When using ki to enhance his physical prowess, his speed rose from roughly low Jonin levels to nearly high Kage level, whereas his already extraordinary physical strength surpassed even Tsunade at her strongest. The only downside was that it took several seconds to call up enough ki from his reserves, and when it came to the ninja world, several seconds was a lifetime. It lucky for him that he was quasi-immortal then. As with all previous absorptions, Naruto gained some powerful emotion from his victims, an increase in pride from Ginyu and a great amount of rage and arrogance from Frieza. Just like with Lucci, Frieza was a being of anger and power, but the sheer amount of rage and bloodlust had been 100 times stronger than anything Lucci had felt, as to be expected, as anger led to strength in this universe. By the time he managed to rein in his rage and anger, Naruto had destroyed over 3 mountain ranges with his small ki blasts alone, a remarkable feat as it took several hundred blasts to reduce such large mountains to rubble. Despite reining in Frieza's emotions and discarding his non-essential memories, he'd been forced to discard a majority of the alien's attacks and techniques in order to bring the emotions down to a manageable level. Still, he could feel the anger just simmering under the surface, ready to lash out at any time. After spending a week working on his ki control and practicing ki-based flight, another 2 days mastering the few techniques he'd kept from Frieza's repertoire, Naruto felt ready to battle Vegeta, who was beyond Super Saiyan level at this time, hence, far stronger than Frieza and Ginyu combined. With that, he set out towards one of the locations Vegeta was known to frequent, Needle Mountain. As with the Bloody Pond, Needle Mountain lived up to its name. It was a large mountain range with several needle-like protrusions jutting out in many random directions. As he approached the mountain, Naruto sensed a large amount of barely concealed power coming from the mountain, the owner feeling no reason to suppress his power. Guess he's there, Naruto mused as he sped forward with a small burst of ki. He found Vegeta at the base of the mountain, his back leaning against the rock wall, arms crossed and his eyes closed, the classic signs of a brooder. As Naruto landed a few meters away, Vegeta opened his eyes and glanced over, sensing the power hidden within his guest. So, the Saiyan Prince began, taking a step forward. You must be the kid Frieza's been looking for, you sure don't look like much. Looks can be deceiving, Naruto replied, not surprised that Frieza would be looking for revenge. But feel free to underestimate me like Frieza did. Hey, don't worry kid, I won't hold back on you. Vegeta smirked, slipping into a fighting stance. A true Saiyan fights with all his strength and utterly crushes his opponents. A spike of his ki, taking the form of a light blue fiery aura, served to emphasize his statement. Slipping into a stance of his own, Naruto grinned back at the Saiyan Prince. Good, at least you won't have any excuses when you lose. Vegeta scoffed as he disappeared in a blur of movement, Naruto following him seconds later. They took to the air, disappearing and reappearing as they sped around exchanging blows, both fighters smirking confidently. Vegeta was soon able to gain the upper hand, landing a powerful axe kick to the top of Naruto's head, sending the blonde plummeting to the ground. As soon as his opponent fell towards the ground, Vegeta began charging up his ki, his arms thrown back as violet-colored balls of energy came to life in each hand. Gaelic gun, he cried, hands flying forward and unleashing his attack, both balls of energy merging together to fire a violet beam of energy. Hearing the shout, Naruto recovered midair and attempted to dodge, moving far too slow to entirely avoid the beam of power. The lower half of his body was caught in the attack, everything from his waist down vanishing as it was disintegrated by the blast, causing him to plummet down to the ground in pain. Vegeta's smug smirk was soon replaced with an angry frown as his opponent's body was fully regenerated, clothes and all, before it even hit the ground. Great, another cell. The Saiyan thought with a grimace, his smirk returning a moment later. At least I'll get a good workout out of this. Taking the pause in battle as an advantage, Vegeta clenched his fists and leaned forward, his teeth grinding together as he gathered his ki. His powerful aura shifted from a light blue to a blinding yellow, his power exploding around him as his hair began flashing from yellow to black, his eyes glowing powerfully. Gra! Vegeta cried out, drawing on his anger to further increase his power. Recovering from his fall, Naruto looked up as he sensed Vegeta's energy spike, grinning as he took in the Saiyan's flashing appearance. Oh wow, he's going Super Saiyan already. Naruto mumbled to himself, grinning wide. And it looks like he's straight to Super Saiyan 2, I must have made a good impression. Deciding not to waste the few seconds it would take for Vegeta to power up, Naruto released all 3 levels of his limiter seals and raised his left hand above his head, his pointer finger extended. Eyes narrowed in concentration, the blonde began drawing up as much ki as he could, focusing it to the tip of his finger. Vegeta had just powered up to Super Saiyan 2 when he noticed his opponent's actions down below. Naruto was standing on the ground with a large orb of dark blue energy on the tip of his finger. Gee, that looks like. But how? Vegeta gasped, eyes widened in surprise. Deciding to figure it out later, he raised both arms to his side, his hands open and glowing with his now yellow-colored ki. As Naruto poured more and more energy into the ball, it grew in size until he was holding up a ball of energy roughly 10 times his size. With a smirk he flicked his finger in Vegeta's direction, releasing the technique and launching the ball of power straight at the Saiyan Prince. Death Ball, he whispered, grinning wide. This was one of the many attacks he'd gained from Frieza, and one of the few that he'd actually decided to keep, mostly due to the fact it could destroy whole planets if enough energy was added. As the ball closed the distance towards him, Vegeta pulled both his hands forward with his wrists touching and the palms facing out, a ball of yellow energy phasing in and out of existence between his hands. Final flash, he shouted, a large beam of yellow energy flying from his palms and crashing right into the death ball. Both techniques clammed into each other, pressing against each other for a few seconds, fighting for supremacy. Raw! Vegeta shouted, pouring more power into his technique, the beam flaring brightly as it plowed through the death ball and slammed into the ground. The explosion was massive, wiping out the entire mountain range and leaving behind a massive crater, kicking up a huge cloud of dust and smoke. As Vegeta caught his breath from the exertion, his eyes widened as he sensed a presence appearing behind him, his opponent's familiar energy brushing against his skin. Spinning around, he launched a knife hand strike at his opponent, smirking as his hand pierced through the other blonde's chest, impaling him on Vegeta's arm. The Naruto on the Saiyan's arm gasped in shock, its eyes wide and afraid, before it smirked and vanished in a puff of smoke. Staring dumbly at what just happened, Vegeta gasped in shock as a beam of blue energy slammed into his back, drilling through his power armor and exiting from his chest. Death Beam! A voice called from below, his opponent's chuckle following him all the way down to the ground. He'd avoided the final flash with a well-timed substitution technique and fired a death beam the second he received the clone's memories. Dropping to the ground, Naruto grinned as he found Vegeta's unconscious form in a small crater, a hole pierced right through his chest, although it was already healing. Man, you really do live up to your reputation. Naruto chuckled, kneeling beside the prince. That was a pretty tough fight, even if it ended a bit quickly. If you had dodged my death ball instead of fighting against it, I may have had a harder time winning, Naruto continued, his vortexes activating. Well, not unless I used my other abilities, that is. Absorbing Vegeta's power was like Frieza times 10, the physical increase was greater, the amount of energy was much larger and the raw anger and pride he gained was far more potent. It had taken him over 6 hours of punching large boulders with his physical strength alone before he calmed down. He'd been forced to regenerate his arms 3 times, but he'd also reduced over 3 dozen boulders to dust. He had then spent an hour discarding all of the memories he had no use for, only keeping 3 techniques out of the lot. The final flash, another planet destroyer which he would enjoy testing. The Big Bang Attack, a powered-down version of the Death Ball which was faster to create and deploy. The Destructo Disc, a disc-shaped attack that was fast to create and launch and was great for cutting through objects from a distance. Naruto had toyed with the idea of keeping and using the fusion dance with one of his clones but had quickly discarded the idea for two important reasons. First, he didn't want to risk it, not knowing what could happen, and two, it looked really stupid and he didn't feel the need to degrade himself like that, even if no one was watching. After 2 weeks of practice with his many techniques, as well as increasing his control over his increased energy levels and avoiding a very angry Frieza and Vegeta, both of whom were searching all over for him, Naruto decided it was time to leave this universe. Before that, however, he made a small trip back to Yama's office to gloat and annoy the troll, being forced to vanish in a flash of red light when said troll tried to crush him. Arriving back in the familiar halls of the multiverse, Naruto hummed to himself as he took in the newest door, the portal to his next destination. The door was completely white in color, the purest white he'd ever seen, with a single weapon painted on its surface. A halberd, Naruto's mind provided. Having some idea of where this door would lead, Naruto took a glance to the plaque, grinning as his assumptions were once more proven correct. Bleach Universe. Number of realms, 5. Patron gods, Shinigami King. With a grin, he opened the door and entered the room, a cheerful skip in his step. This is going to be fun. Entering the room, he was met with yet another white expanse, not unlike that of the Fullmetal Alchemist realm, except for the single obsidian throne several meters away. Damn it, not again. Glancing around, he noticed that the realm doors were all lined up around the door he'd just entered through, 3 doors on the left side and 2 on the right. Another glance around showed that he was completely alone in this void. The throne was empty and there was no god appearing before him, quite different when compared to the universes he'd visited. Shrugging to himself, he decided to take this as a good sign and move forward, namely through a door and into a separate realm. After a glance over the multiple doors, he chose to simply close his eyes and pick one at random, his fingers landing on the second door from the left. The door was pitch black in color with a purple plaque affixed to the center, golden words etched across its surface. Bleach Realm Number 2, Divergence. After Aizen fails to recover the Hogyoku, he is deserted by his army, forcing him to flee both the Soul Society and Hueco Mundo. No Aizen to deal with, that makes this so much easier. Naruto mused, grabbing the doorknob. It's a bit of a pity though, I really would have liked to break his nose. For the second time in under a month, Naruto found himself stepping through a doorway and falling towards the ground, the doorway exiting several hundred feet above the ground. Already having some sort of experience with this type of situation, the blonde drew on his ki and stopped his fall, hovering midair and allowing himself to remain airborne. Taking a glance at the ground below, the blonde noticed that he was hovering several meters above a sea of white sand, immediately recognizable as the silver desert of Hueco Mundo. Rawr! A quick dash to the side was the only thing that saved the blonde from becoming lunch for a rampaging Jillian, the large beast dashing past him, its maw snapping shut on his previous location. That's when he realized that he wasn't alone. Crowding up behind him were close to a dozen Jillians, all bent over and feasting on a torn corpse of another Jillian. Or they were at least, until one of their number broke away with a roar, drawing their attention. As one, 3 of the Jillians snapped their mouths wide open, an orb of crimson power swirling into existence between their lips. Oh shit, Naruto shouted, just barely avoiding the multiple hollow flashes as they blasted past him. Having avoided the 3 beams, he was forced to dodge further as the remaining Jillians attempted to eat him, the mouths snapping closed with loud cracks. Screw it, Naruto growled, his hands forming the familiar cross-shaped seal. No one tries to eat me, prepare to die you bastards. Shadow Clone Technique. With a light poof of smoke, 20 clones popped into existence around him, wasting no time as they dashed away from his position, drawing the Jillians away. With the clones serving as a distraction, Naruto rose high above the mob and began gathering his ki, looking forward to the slaughter ahead, a bit of his absorbed emotions leaking through. With a single thought, he shifted the entirety of his right arm into a massive blade, an exact copy of Zabuza's Kubikiribochi, except for the fact it was over 12 feet long and 3 feet wide. The blade was formed from hardened carbon atoms, making it stronger and harder than a diamond, with its edge sharpened to a point. Raising the giant blade above his head, Naruto flew right through the mob of hollows, slashing and stabbing masks as he went. As more and more of the hollows died to his blade, the rest began ignoring he and his clones, preferring to tear apart and feast upon the remains of their fallen comrades. Seeing as the short battle was over, Naruto simply shrugged and shifted his arm back to normal, his clones dispersing as he turned away from the feasting Jillians. Taking a quick glance around the landscape, he was able to spot the fortress of Las Noches off in the distance, a massive structure amidst the emptiness of the desert. It took him several minutes to reach the fortress, the blonde coming to a stop at the fortress walls, hundreds of beady little eyes observing him from the sands below. It would appear that his energy output, despite being a different form of energy, had been detected by the various Arankar within the fortress, seeing as one of their number was steadily making their way to his position. As he landed a few feet from the wall, he was approached by who he recognized to be Tia Haribel, the third strongest of the Espada. While her face was completely blank of emotion, Naruto could clearly see the curiosity burning in her eyes. Her mask wasn't as good as she thought. "Who are you?" Haribel asked, coming to a stop a few feet away, her fracken forming up around her. "What is a human doing in Hueco Mundo?" "Greetings, miss," Naruto began, hinting for her name despite already knowing it. "Haribel," she replied without pause, eyes narrowing perceptibly. "Miss Haribel," Naruto continued with a soft smile. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I am here seeking a fight with Ulquiorra Cipher." That definitely brought some emotion to her face, her eyes widening in surprise. "I will let him know." She promptly disappeared with a buzz of static, her faction exchanging a look before joining her. Naruto simply shrugged and took a seat, hovering midair as he hummed to himself, awaiting Haribel's return. Several minutes passed before she returned, her mask back in place and her fracken absent, simply quirking a brow as she noticed his hovering state. "He will be waiting for you in the arena, follow me," she ordered, turning and walking towards the fortress. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto decided to follow. "Well, this was kind of easy," Naruto commented to her back. "I expected more of a fight before getting what I want. We hollows have lived for a very long time," Haribel replied, turning her head to glance at him. "It gets quite boring around here. Watching your battle with Ulquiorra will prove to be quite entertaining. Also," she continued after a moment's pause, "you are quite unlike any other human or Shinigami we have encountered. We look forward to seeing how you fight." They arrived at the arena a few minutes later, passing by a group of lingering Arankar, all of whom were watching him closely whilst conversing. The arena itself was simply a large, walled-off expanse of desert with several seats carved into the walls, all of which were filled with hollows awaiting the coming battle. In the middle of the arena stood Ulquiorra Cipher, his eyes closed and both his hands tucked into his pockets. Clearly he was waiting for his opponent. As soon as they entered the arena, Haribel vanished with a buzz of static, heading to the stands without further comment. Shrugging to himself, Naruto proceeded into the arena, steadily making his way towards Ulquiorra. Glancing around at his surroundings, he noticed that every single member of the Espada was present, each giving him a curious look. Even the ever-lazy Stark was paying close attention. As Naruto made it to the center of the arena, Ulquiorra opened his eyes and observed his opponent, emerald eyes glinting with curiosity. "How do you know me, human?" the Espada asked, his tone cold and emotionless. "I don't believe we have ever been acquainted." "We haven't," Naruto replied with a wide grin. "I heard your name mentioned in the desert and decided to come and fight you." "Is that so?" Ulquiorra asked, his eyes and tone void of emotion. "And how exactly did you come to be in the desert of Hueco Mundo?" "Great, another brooding tem, just my luck," Naruto mused, his grin lessening. "That," he began, building suspense, although Ulquiorra looked unbothered. "As a secret. Then I will just have to force you to share this secret." Ulquiorra stated simply, "Prepare for battle." Still grinning, Naruto dropped into a fighting stance, his opponent remaining unchanged. Both remained unmoving for several moments, then, out of nowhere, Naruto felt a light pressure slam down onto his shoulders. It wasn't harmful or restrictive, but it was quite noticeable nonetheless. "So, you can withstand my spiritual pressure," Ulquiorra mused, quirking a curious brow. "You truly are an odd human." "Thanks," Naruto replied, deciding to make the first move. Shave. In a blur of movement, he vanished, only to reappear an instant later with a loud thud, his foot lodged in the crook of his opponent's neck, not that it seemed to have even fazed the other man. His face still blank of emotion, Ulquiorra simply glanced at Naruto's extended leg, eyes narrowed in thought. "You certainly hit harder than any regular human," Ulquiorra commented, unaware that his opponent could hit much, much harder. "But not hard enough to break through my iron body technique." With that, his right hand lashed out of his pocket, striking the blonde square in the chest. Shifting his skin into an unbreakable carbon compound, Naruto simply remained still and allowed the Arrancar's blow to connect, rendering the blow ineffective. That definitely brought some emotion to the Hollow's face, shock. "It appears that you need to hit harder as well," Naruto chuckled, his tone mocking and cheerful. Taking advantage of his opponent's shock, Naruto shifted his right pointer finger into a metal spike and struck back, aiming for his opponent's torso. Finger gun. Naruto took a great amount of dark pleasure at the look on his opponent's face as his finger pierced right through his iron body, breaking through flesh and bone and leaving a small hole directly below the Arrancar's hollow hole. With a slight rasp in pain, Ulquiorra buzzed away from the blonde, eyeing him warily. "Word of advice, Ulquiorra cipher," Naruto chuckled, his finger returning to normal. "Don't underestimate me, you just might die." "Yes, you are correct. I was quite mistaken to underestimate you," Ulquiorra replied, his back straightening as his wound hissed shut, leaving a patch of bare flesh behind. "I will take you seriously from now on." With that he drew his sword, an emerald aura of power springing to life around him, the pressure on Naruto's shoulder increasing. "Joy," the blonde muttered. Standing a fair distance away from the battle, 9 members of the Espada watched the battle in mild surprise, a noticeable gap between them and the other Arrancar. "Oh wow, the kid actually made Ulquiorra draw his blade," Grimmjow noted, teeth glinting in the light as he grinned widely. "I would too if some human was unfazed by my punch," Neutra responded, his grin matching that of his fellow Espada. "Especially, if said human managed to pierce my iron body, I'd definitely get serious then. There's also the fact that Ulquiorra's iron body is one of the most powerful among us Espada, second only to mine." "Yes, there is something strange about that human," Stark commented, yawning lazily. "At first I assumed he was concealing his Ryutsu, but there wasn't any Ryutsu in his previous attacks, not even that movement skill of his. No one is that good at concealing their Ryutsu." "I concur, he either has no Ryutsu or he has yet to unlock it." Baragan grunted, eyes narrowed and focused. "I wonder how he entered Hueco Mundo though. There was no sign of a portal opening in the desert." Naruto had spent the last few minutes dodging around Ulquiorra. He found it nearly impossible to follow the Arrancar's fast movements, forced to rely on his instincts and reflexes to avoid the other Mont's blade. Of course, he could have simply activated his dojutsu and improved his perception, but he was just having far too much fun. This fight was quite enjoyable after all. He was mostly dodging for the fun of it. If he wanted to, he could simply allow the blade to glance of his nigh impenetrable skin. It may have been a tad hypocritical of him to not only underestimate his opponent but to toy with him as well, but he didn't really give a damn. He was quasi-immortal, it's not like he could die from such a mistake. While he could dodge, if just barely sometimes, he could find no openings in Ulquiorra's style. The 4th Espada was a master swordsman, a skill Naruto was looking forward to incorporating into his repertoire. 5 minutes passed, the blonde dodging every single blow and Ulquiorra continuing on persistently, until there. Having repeated the exact same pattern several times, Ulquiorra added a brand new movement at the very end, catching the blonde by complete surprise. With a powerful swing, he brought the blade down, removing the blonde's left arm at the elbow. Naruto jumped back at that, pretending to stare in shock at his missing limb, his blood pouring out and staining the desert sand. "Surrender, human. You have lost your arm," Ulquiorra stated, sheathing his blade. "As you have clearly seen, you cannot dodge me forever, you cannot win." Gritting his teeth in false anger, Naruto glared at the hollow, eyes glowing in his amusement. "I told you not to underestimate me," the blonde yelled, bringing his remaining arm up and firing several key blasts into Ulquiorra's chest, sending the Espada flying. "What the hell?" Grimmjow shouted, eyes wide with shock. "Those weren't Kido spells." "Yes, there was no Ryutsu in those attacks at all," Zael commented, eyes glimmering with amusement and curiosity. What is he? I don't kn. Harabel's reply was cut off by a powerful spike of power in the arena, a shockwave blowing out from Naruto's position. Hurrah! Naruto shouted, his ki levels rising as he continued powering up, drawing on every single drop of power in his reserves. What is that aura? Ulquiorra wondered, closely examining the dark blue aura surrounding his opponent. He was about to draw his blade again, already learning from his previous mistakes to not underestimate the blonde, when said blonde vanished in a blur. He's gotten faster. What is that enter? The hollow's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden pain in his right shoulder, a quick glance showing that he was missing his arm, the entire appendage having been torn off at the shoulder. His shock was clear on his face, his emotionless mask wiped away. What the hell just happened? A sound drew his attention to the front, Naruto appearing a few feet in front of him, his missing arm in the blonde's hand. You should surrender, Hollow. You've lost your arm. Naruto snickered, his tone light and mocking. You can't win. How did he do that? He has no Ryutsu, yet his speed and strength have improved over tenfold, to the point he could tear through my iron body with no resistance. Ulquiorra pondered, his eye focused on his opponent's fore. What was that aura? What is this energy he uses? You should take your own advice, human, don't underestimate me. Ulquiorra replied, his arm regenerating in a flare of power and a blast of gore. I don't know how you managed to get faster and stronger, but it seems like I can't afford to hold back anymore. Prepare yourself. With that he drew his sword, his Ryutsu spiking in preparation of something. You shouldn't have held back in the first place. Naruto chuckled, grinning darkly. I need to hurry this up. Naruto mused, paying close attention to Ulquiorra as the hollow's Ryutsu continued to rise in power. I'm losing far too much blood from this wound. He's going to get suspicious when I don't pass out from blood loss. Movement from Ulquiorra drew the blonde's full attention, the hollow raising his blade and pointing it towards Naruto. His Ryutsu spiking once more, Ulquiorra spoke. In close. I can't believe Ulquiorra is being forced to use his resurrection. Harabel thought to herself, highly shocked by the skills being displayed by this human. To be able to push the fourth strongest of the Espada this far, who is this kid? Stark wondered, eyes narrowed in concentration despite his lazy countenance. Hey, the kid's got no chance now, no way Ulquiorra can lose. Yami smirked, fully confident in the skills of his fellow Espada. Murcielago, black-winged great demon. With a burst of power, Ulquiorra's blade exploded in black and green Ryutsu, the energy surrounding the Arankar and shooting up into the air, forming a black cloud which rained down green Ryutsu. Several seconds passed before the rain stopped, the aura dying down and revealing Ulquiorra, the Arankar standing in the full glory of his released form. As Ulquiorra's released form came into view, Naruto felt a tremendous amount of spirit pressure slamming down on his shoulders, pressing down on him and attempting to crush him. While larger than the first flare of Ryutsu, this was nothing he couldn't handle, his own supply of Raryoku being greater than that of his opponent despite being dormant. Still, he didn't mind feigning weakness, stumbling slightly and falling to one knee. You should have surrendered when you had the chance. Ulquiorra spoke, steadily approaching the blonde. Do not despair, I won't kill you, yet. I'll just make sure you can't run away, we have far too many questions for you. With a flare of power, a lance of green energy came into existence in the Arankar's hand, the hollow vanishing and appearing before the blonde in a burst of speed, his weapon raised high above his head. Lance of the lightning, he's gotten faster, Naruto noted, preparing to counterattack. As the weapon dropped, Naruto spiked his ki and dashed to the side, narrowly dodging the blow and grabbing the Arankar by the wrist. What? Ulquiorra screamed in his mind, eyes widening in shock as his aura and Ryutsu vanished instantly. My Raryoku, I can't feel my power, what has he done? Raising his other hand in his panic, Ulquiorra lashed out at the blonde's neck, hoping to land a blow on his one-armed opponent, but it was ineffective against the blonde's impenetrable hide. It seems we are at a standstill, human, Ulquiorra observed, frantically reaching for his Raryoku, to no effect. Smirking in reply, Naruto finally allowed his arm to regenerate, much to the astonishment of all the gathered hollows. Without pause, he channeled all his ki into the arm and stabbed it forward, piercing right through the hollow's chest and impaling him on the arm, You never stood a chance, Hollow. Naruto whispered, enjoying the look of shock and pain on his opponent's face. I could have ended this quickly, but you reminded me of someone I really hate. At that, Naruto yanked his arm back, tearing out a portion of Ulquiorra's spine. Regenerate that, he muttered to the dying Hollow, blood and gore dripping from his hand. As the audience stared on in shock, Naruto absorbed Ulquiorra's blood and Ryutsu, retrieving what he came for from the Hollow. He was quite surprised to note that Ulquiorra was actually healing from the wound. It was slower than before, but he was regenerating nonetheless. As he stood, Naruto looked up in amusement as the other Espada and Arrancar dropped into the arena, their faces a mix of awe and rage. You don't really think we'll let you go, do you? Neutra asked, his massive blade slung over one shoulder. Not after you almost killed one of our own. Remaining silent, Naruto broke down Ulquiorra's samples and absorbed them, the Hollows watching in surprise as his body seemed to swell before returning to normal. Then they all gasped as a massive spiritual pressure crashed onto their shoulders, the weaker Arrancar dropping to the ground while the rest managed to brush it off. Impressive Ryutsu for someone who just unlocked it, Stark commented, gaining odd looks from his fellow Arrancar. That's what you did right. You used Ulquiorra's Raryoku to unlock your own. Grinning widely, Naruto remained silent. Oi! Answer him! Grimmjow shouted, hand gripping his sword handle in anger. Chuckling in amusement, Naruto opened his mouth and spoke. Cromwell Initiative. Full release. He simply received curious looks from the Hollows, but he paid it no mind, his attention focused on the reddish glow coming from his hands, the seals deactivating and releasing his full might. Without warning, an unbelievable pressure slammed into every Hollow there, dropping all but the top two Espada to their knees and rendering all below the 6th rank unconscious. The pressure was so immense that even Baragan and Stark, both known for their terrifying Raryoku levels, were shaking where they stood. I hate to fight and run. Naruto chuckled, his tone cheerful and pleased. But I don't quite feel the need to slaughter you all right now, ta-ta. Black cavity. A swipe of his arm created the needed portal, the fabric of reality splitting apart and revealing a dark void, quite the useful technique. What was he? Stark wondered, glancing down at his fellow Hollows, some of whom were already recovering with the lapse of spiritual pressure. 1 month later, after his fight with the 4th Espada and his expedient escape from the Arrancar army, Naruto found himself exiting his portal in the forest of Manos, the furthest he could get from Las Noches. He'd chosen this spot in order to avoid the Arrancar as he trained, as his ki, chakra and Raryoku had greatly increased from his recent absorption. After leafing through and sorting Ulquiorra's memories, Naruto found that Ulquiorra's inherent apathy was a great counter to the emotions of his previous victims, especially where the anger and bloodlust was concerned, although he was quite experienced in keeping said emotions suppressed. This little tidbit led to him keeping a great majority of Ulquiorra memories, as centuries of apathy would be helpful should he absorb more memories in the future. The first 2 weeks of his training was spent playing around with his Raryoku and mastering Ulquiorra's main techniques, namely the Hollow Flash, Royal Hollow Flash, Black Hollow Flash and the weaker but faster Hollow Bullet. In addition to his offensive techniques, he spent a great deal of time practicing with the sound technique, managing to fuse it with the Rokushiki's shave technique, allowing him to achieve speeds comparable to instantaneous teleportation at full power. Unfortunately for him, his first test of the technique had led to a full regeneration of his body, requiring him to shift into a stronger material before moving at those speeds. The final technique added to his repertoire was the probe circuit, which he used to supplement his sensing abilities as well as his sparsely used mental abilities, allowing him sense both energy levels and minds from great distances. As for the rest of Ulquiorra's techniques, he was pleaded to discard the iron body and negation techniques, both of which were highly defensive in nature and of no use to him. He'd already proven that his shapeshifting abilities were far superior to the defense of the iron body technique, and he could easily create impenetrable barriers should he ever require them, rendering both technique useless. With his Raryoku-based training out of the way, Naruto moved on to his physical training, namely the implementation of Ulquiorra's sword style. It took him a few days of practice to fit the style to his body build, but it was well worth the effort, allowing him to jump from an untrained initiate to Ulquiorra's master level in a matter of days. Deciding he would need a weapon to fight with, Naruto chose to simply create one himself, using his abilities and pilfered knowledge to do so. It was quite an easy task to accomplish, however, simply requiring him to tear off one of his arms and shifting it into the blade he wanted, far simpler than building one with raw resources. As for the weapon, he'd decided to wield something known as a gunblade, a sword with a gun-shaped hilt. When the weapon's trigger was pulled, it would release a shockwave through the entire device, causing the blade to vibrate rapidly for increased damage. It was quite a formidable weapon, one that was gifted with a fitting name, Dread. As his month of training came to an end, Naruto was more than prepared to move on, leaving the dark forest of Manos behind in a bright flash of red light. As he reappeared in the multiverse, Naruto was surprised to find himself in a room rather than the endless hallway that usually greeted his transitions. However, this was a room he recognized greatly. It was, after all, the room where he'd last seen the Jubi. Taking a look around, he found no one else in the room, which meant that Kami and Shinigami were still away, whereas Jubi was likely still resting from his breakout. With none of his patron gods there to greet, or speak, with him, Naruto decided to go ahead with his plans. He steadily made his way to the closest door, a sky-blue, wooden door with a single word etched onto its plaque. Home. Chuckling darkly, the blonde threw open the door and stepped through without pause, his entire frame vibrating with excitement and glee. As the door closed behind Naruto, 3 figures appeared around the room's single fixture, their forms fading into existence at the blink of an eye. Sharing a glance, the 3 smirked and took their seats, the dark-haired male standing a moment later and heading towards a shadowed corner. I'll get the popcorn. Rewritten Chapter 7. Return. For the 3rd time in 2 months, Naruto found himself plummeting towards the ground, having exited a doorway several hundred meters above the ground. Fuck. The blonde cursed, stopping himself mid-air. Who the hell picks these damn exit locations? Taking a look around, Naruto noticed that he was hovering above a large crater, the same crater he'd created after unsealing the Jubi several months ago. Hey, home sweet home. The blonde chuckled, grinning darkly as he stared off into the distance. I better let everyone know that I'm back, just in case they missed me. He snorted at that and flew off, looking forward to the coming encounter. It took him just a few minutes' flight to reach the village, approaching and landing in the nearby forest, roughly an hour's walk from the village walls. With that, he shifted into a civilian man in his mid-30s with short brown hair and dark eyes, wearing a light gray shirt and pale green pants. His sword, usually kept at his waist, was transformed into a gleaming silver necklace with a miniature version of the weapon attached to it, while his limiter seals and vortexes were moved to his chest. He'd found out a long time ago that those didn't disappear when he shifted, he could only move their positions. Suppressing his energy levels to civilian standards, he made his way towards the village, cheerfully skipping along as he did so. It was so good to be back in his own realm. He arrived at Konoha's gates an hour later, the area empty except for the 2 gate guards, a pair of chunin that always seemed to be on guard duty. As he passed through the large city gates, he was stopped by one of the 2 guards, Katetsu if he remembered correctly. Halt, state your name and business in Konoha. The chunin called out from his booth. Naruto recognized him from the mob over a year ago, the chunin looking far more cheerful than the blonde had ever seen him. Not in his presence at least, not many in Konoha had looked cheerful whenever he was around. Good afternoon, my name is Ulquiorra Cipher. Naruto replied, using the name of his last opponent. I'm here to see the Hokage, it's in regards to the bounty for Uzumaki Naruto. As soon as the words left his mouth, a 4-man Anbu squad appeared via body flicker, surrounding him in a small circle. Playing the role of an average civilian, Naruto pretended to be amazed and shocked by the little trick, jumping frightfully as the 4 men appeared. Please come with us, sir. The dog-masked Anbu commanded, Naruto easily recognizing the voice as Kakashi's. Okay. He replied meekly, allowing one of the Anbu to place his hand on his shoulder. In a blur of twisting movement they were gone, the Anbu body flickering him to the Hokage tower, bringing them right outside Tsunade's office. Still playing his role, Naruto pretended to be sick from the fast travel, watching slyly as one of the Anbu relayed his message to the Hokage. He was soon ushered into the room, the door closing behind him as he entered, the Anbu taking their positions in the corners. Entering the room, Naruto was pleased to see the remaining members of the Rookie 9 and their senseis at the mission's desk, a stoic Iruka sitting behind said desk and handing out missions with his fellow Chunin. Team Guy stood at Tsunade's desk, looking like they had just been interrupted mid-conversation, and he could sense Jiraiya outside the window, probably waiting for the room to empty before making a top-secret report to Tsunade. Perfect, everyone's here. Naruto chuckled, taking in the strange gathering of teams. Do I have great timing or what? Greetings Cypher-san, Tsunade began, her eyes focused demanding. I was informed that you have information pertaining to Uzumaki Naruto. Deciding to test a theory he'd had for a while, one that Kyuubi had refused to confirm or deny, Naruto answered. Ah yes, I know where your Yondaime's son is. He practically felt the Anbu and Jonin in the room stiffen, Jiraiya stumbling and nearly falling from the wall outside, while the other kids his age and Iruka looked shocked and confused. Using his telepathy on the Hokage, Naruto confirmed his theory. His father was Namikaze Minato, the bastard who had sealed the fox into him and single-handedly ruined his childhood. He was also pleased to find the identity of his mother, Uzumaki Kushina, a talented kunoichi that had died giving birth. Much to his anger, however, Tsunade and Jiraiya had known both his parents and had both kept this information from him, neither feeling the need to inform him of such an important fact. Furthermore, both had been named his godparents, yet they had abandoned him on the day of his birth, one to spy on women and write his perverted books, the other to drink and gamble her life away. Naruto felt utter rage at the revelation, his anger spiking to the point that he could feel his ki bubbling under his skin, yet he managed to rein it in. It wouldn't do to lose his mind and kill them all, not yet anyways. Unaware of the sudden mental intrusion, Tsunade narrowed her eyes and spiked her chakra, her killing intent flooding the room and causing the genin and chunin to shudder. How do you know about that? She growled, fingers digging furrows into the wood of her desk. That is an S-rank village secret. Speak quickly before I have you taken to the T&I department. She flinched back as the man's face twisted into a hateful sneer, his eyes burning with suppressed rage. This was no ordinary civilian. I just took a guess based on our similar appearances. I wasn't 100% sure about it until the thoughts crossed your mind. Tsunade Bachan. The man spat back, causing eyes to widen in shock at the familiar address to the Hokage and the meaning of the man's sentence. That means you're... Kurenai gasped, eyes wide as she put two and two together. Correct. He replied, his body rippling much like it had during their last encounter as he shifted and changed. In the place of a 30-year-old civilian male, with plain brown hair and eyes, the 13-year-old form of Uzumaki Naruto was revealed. He seemed to have put on some muscle and grown to an admirable height, removing the short and stocky appearance of his youth and replacing it with that of a tall and well-toned teen, the athletic frame of a true shinobi. He stood at just under 6 feet tall, making him the tallest of his gathered peers, Shikamaru coming in at a close second. His face had lost all of its baby fat, giving him an angular facial structure, which combined with his now slanted eyes and fair complexion to give him a bit of a regal appearance. His whisker marks had also completely disappeared, although his sapphire eyes had retained their vibrancy. Another change in his appearance was with his outfit. He was no longer wearing the orange monstrosity of his youth or the black and red outfit from their previous meeting. He now wore a black, long-sleeved T-shirt with a dark blue Jonin vest over top. The vest was kept open, revealing the kanji for Maelstrom that was written on the shirt in blue. In addition to this, he wore baggy black pants with a pair of blue stripes running down both sides and a stripe of white tape wrapped around both ankles. On his feet were a pair of pitch black geta, a matching pair of gloves adorning his hands, a red Uzumaki swirl stitched onto the back of each glove. Over top of his new outfit, Naruto now wore a crimson Akatsuki-style cloak, black Uzumaki swirls replacing the clouds of the original ensemble. As soon as he had fully revealed himself, Jiraiya jumped through the office window, the look of shock and surprise on his face matching that of his fellow Konohanin. Naruto. Iruka stuttered, surprise and relief showing clear on his face. Hello Iruka-sensei, Naruto greeted, smiling kindly to his surrogate brother. It's good to see you again. What the hell Naruto Baka, where the hell have you been this entire time? Sakura screeched, ruining the moment as she marched up to him. Glaring at the pink-haired banshee, Naruto spoke in a tone so cold that sent chills down everyone's spines. Sakura, be silent before I kill you. Despite his words and actions at their last meeting, everyone in the room was clearly shocked. The Naruto they knew would never threaten anyone, yet alone his, Sakura-chan. Why so surprised? The blonde asked, quirking a brow in question. You all seem to be forgetting that I am still your enemy. With those words, the Anbu finally reacted, surrounding the blonde with their kunai drawn. What are you doing? Tsunade shouted, leaping to her feet angrily. Stand down. With all due respect, Hokage-sama. Kakashi began, his uncovered eye narrowed at his former student. He is still an A- class missing nin, one that has just threatened the life of Konoha nin and stated clearly that he was our enemy. Turning her attention to the blonde, Tsunade frowned sadly as she spoke. Naruto, after what happened 2 months ago, the villagers have all realized that you are not the Kyuubi or Jubi or whatever, won't you please come back home? Naruto stared for a moment. Then he blinked. Then he exploded in laughter. What's so funny about that Dobi? Kiba growled, eyes narrowed at the slowly recovering blonde. Now that we know that you're not a demon, you can come back. Naruto straightened from his bent position, one hand rising to wipe the tears from his eyes. It had been quite a while since he'd laughed so hard. What's funny, Inuzuka, is the fact that you all seem to think that I'll simply forgive you people in return as if everything was alright. Naruto ranted, eyes glowing balefully as his anger rose, his ki bubbling beneath the surface once more. It took over 13 years to figure out that I'm not a demon. Well, it's far too late now. I swore an oath of revenge and I won't stop until this village has been reduced to ashes. His eyes snapped to Jiraiya and Tsunade, causing the two to flinch back at the sheer hatred and rage in those vibrant orbs. And don't think I'm going to let the two of you off the hook either. You were my godparents and yet you abandoned me for your own selfish reasons. He snarled, causing their eyes to widen. Don't deny it, I can see it clearly in your minds. That definitely spread shock through the more observant members of his audience. Since when could the blonde read minds? Sakura, being the stupid fangirl that she was, yeah. I don't like her, chose that moment of silence to throw her 2 cents in. Naruto baka, quit trying to be cool, as if you could destroy the village. You couldn't even beat Sasuke-kun without it cheating. Stop acting. Faster than most could follow or react, Naruto sped around the Anbu and appeared in front of the girl, his hand flying from his side and grabbing her by chin as he effortlessly lifted her from the floor. Didn't I tell you to be silent? The blonde growled, a wave of his hand knocking away the retaliatory kunai from the Anbu. You must really have a death wish, Haruno. She glared right back and spoke through scrunched up lips. Go ahead, I dare you. You won't hurt me, I'm your precious Sakura-cha. Crack, with a squeeze of his fingers he broke her jaw, dislodging several teeth at the same time, and released her. The others gasped as Sakura shrieked and dropped to the floor, alternating between sobbing in pain and spitting out teeth, a humorous sight as far as Naruto was concerned. As soon as the Pinkett was clear of danger, the Anbu struck, each drawing a standard issue tanto and impaling the blonde through various vital points, aiming for a fast and painful kill. No, Jiraiya, Iruka and Tsunade cried out, eyes wide in shock and fear. Naruto simply glanced down at the blades piecing his body, looked up at the gathered ninja with a bored expression on his face and continued the conversation. Now then, I bet you're all wondering why I'm here today. He spoke, ignoring the 4 different weapons piercing what everyone thought were his major RGNs. He had easily shifted his organs out of the way the moment the weapons had touched his skin. Compared to most of the beings he had faced, these Anbu had been moving at a snail's pace. How the hell are you still alive? Ino shrieked, her mouth gaping in shock. That's for me to know and for you to never find out. Naruto replied, eyes reflecting his boredom. Troublesome blonde. Shikamaru sighed, equally as bored as the blonde. He's always healed fast, Ino. Based off of what we saw 2 months ago, it's obvious that his healing capabilities have been increased to extraordinary levels. I'm neither going to confirm or deny that. Naruto replied, earning a smirk from the Nara air. Now then, can we get back to the topic at hand? Fine, Naruto, why have you returned here? Kakashi asked, roughly tugging on his blade, an action that hardly fazed the blonde. I have 3 reasons, Naruto replied, tugging the other 3 weapons from his body and tossing them to their owners. The first is to deliver a few messages. What messages? Asuma asked, lighting a cigarette. Well, as we speak, I have a few clones running around the village, looking for the few people within this village that I care about. I need to inform them that I'm back and that they are free to leave the village without fear of being hunted down by me." Naruto answered, eyes flickering over the other shinobi. "That includes you, Shino, Shikamaru, Choji. You and your clans have never treated me badly." "Noted," Shino replied with a nod. "This also includes you, Iruka-sensei, Lee, Neji." Naruto continued, giving them each a glance. "As for the rest of you," Naruto chuckled, taking in the looks on their faces. "Well, try not to die." He almost broke out in laughter at the look on their faces, a mix of incredulity, anger and fear. It was quite hilarious. "The second reason I'm here is to claim my inheritance," the blonde continued, smirking darkly. "My clones have already entered the Namikaze estate and they are currently sealing every item of value. Everything that is rightfully mine will be taken." That caused jaws to drop, shock spreading through the gathered shinobi. "I wonder how much I can get for the Rasengan or the Hiroshin in Kumo." Naruto pondered out loud, smirking darkly. "Or maybe Iwa would be interested in a little trade." "You can't do that," Kakashi bellowed, growling in anger. "You can't stop me," Naruto retorted, chuckling in amusement. "We may not be able to kill you, but we can still capture you, Naruto." Tsunade added, preventing the beginnings of fight. "You can't fight all of us as well as the other ninja in the village, Naruto. As much as I care for you, I have my duty as Hokage." "A duty you wouldn't have if it hadn't been for me," Naruto replied, eyes rolling in annoyance. "But that's not important. I don't need to fight you, in fact. I've already left the tower." Poof. All eyes widened in shock as every shinobi there realized they had been speaking to a clone this entire time, a clone that had somehow managed to survive being stabbed in the vitals, unless the blonde had somehow managed to replace himself undetected. With Naruto's disappearance, the various shinobi rushed out the door or body flickered out of the tower, leaving a sobbing Sakura alone in the room. Arriving outside, they found Naruto surrounded by 10 Anbu squads as well as a few Jonin and Chunin, various villagers looking on from a distance. "Give up, Naruto, you can't win," Tsunade called out, leaping onto a nearby rooftop. "Surrender now and we'll be lenient on your punishment." Naruto smirked and released one level of his limiter seals, his power swirling around within him. "You're forgetting the third reason I returned," he replied, eyes glinting mischievously. "You never said what it was, Dobi," Kiba yelled from below, the Inuzuka looking forward to the coming fight. "Ah, so I didn't," Naruto chuckled, scratching his chin sheepishly. "Well, the third reason I returned was to make a point." As he finished speaking, the blonde unleashed the unsealed portion of Ryutsu on the whole village, which seemed to have varying effects on the various citizens. All civilians were knocked to the ground in fear while the Genin and Chunin were forced to one knee, pressed down by some sort of invisible pressure on their shoulders. The weaker Jonin found themselves frozen in place, unable to move or even think straight, while the stronger Jonin and above were simply weighed down by the light pressure. "What is this?" many thought, shocked by the sudden pressure. "It feels like killing intent, but it's different. How strong have you become, Naruto?" Jiraiya wondered, stumbling under the sudden pressure. "Don't underestimate me," the blonde ground out, eyes glinting maliciously. "I'm no longer the weak fool you used to know. Look around, Tsunade, your soldiers can barely handle a quarter of my power." This caused many eyes to widen, many wondering just how strong the blonde had become in just over a year. Now then, the blonde began, vanishing and reappearing atop the Hokage tower in a burst of instantaneous movement, spreading more shock and surprise at the sheer speed displayed. "I'll leave you all with a parting gift." He didn't even use any hand seals, Neji noticed, Byakugan eyes active and focused. That wasn't a body flicker. That was as fast as Sensei's improved version of the body flicker. How is that possible? Kakashi wondered, mind racing rapidly. It sounded like static when he moved. Was it a lightning technique? Tsunade mused, already working on breaking down and understanding the technique. Ignoring any stray thoughts from his opponents, Naruto raised his right arm in the air, a ball of dark blue energy forming in his hands. "Is that the Rasengan?" Jiraiya pondered, eyes focusing on the small ball of energy. "No, there's no discernible chakra in that technique. What are you doing, Naruto?" As Naruto slowly formed his technique, he took in the looks of shock, awe and fear on many faces. This is how it should have been from the start. They should have either worshipped me or feared me, just like Gaara and his village. The blonde mused, soaking in the looks and the emotions behind them. Now it's far too late. I'll take their choice away and revel in their fear. He had formed this attack far slower than normal, preferring to take his time in order to not only make it stronger but to build up suspense, leaving his audience to wonder at his plans. Holding his arm out towards the Hokage monument, he spiked his power once more and released his technique, aiming at 2 of the 5 Hokage. Hollow flash. In a flare of blue light, a beam of concentrated power left the blonde's hands, flying across half the village and slamming into the Hokage monument. The resulting explosion was massive, shaking most of the village and kicking up a large cloud of dust, hiding the monument from view. A wave of the blonde's hand created a gust of wind, clearing the dust and revealing the monument, much to the fear of Konoha's citizens. The beam had blasted a large circular trench through the monument before exploding, destroying the faces of both the Yondaime and the Godlike Hokages, a truly devastating technique. Looking down at them all, Naruto smirked. The fear and terror was nearly palpable. That was one of my weaker techniques. I could use more, but I feel no need to kill you today. You must all live to regret what you have done. Naruto spoke, his voice echoing throughout the village. I will burn this village to the ground. I will subject you all to true misery and despair until I feel that you have been suitably punished. When I feel that your punishment has been served, then and only then, will you have my permission to die. With that he rose slowly from the rooftop, further shocking his opponents, before blasting off into the distance. 2 hours later, Suna, Sabaku no Gaara, Kei's cage of Sunagaku, was currently trapped behind a pile of paperwork in his office. It was at that moment that he felt the sudden appearance of a familiar presence, one that was nearby and quickly approaching his tower, far too quickly to be normal. He was just about to call for his team when he heard a voice behind him, the presence instantaneously appearing within his office. Congratulations on the promotion, Kazekage-sama, the voice spoke from directly behind him, causing the redhead's eyes to widen. It's good to see that you followed my advice. Turning on his heel, Gaara's sand lashed out at the intruder, only to find no one there. Is that any way to greet an old friend? The voice called once more, from directly behind him yet again. Turning back around, slower and more relaxed this time, he was met with the sight of Uzumaki Naruto sitting across the desk, giving a small but noticeable smile. Gaara simply sighed, the corners of his lips quirking upwards in the slightest manner. Uzumaki Naruto. Please Gaara, Naruto chuckled, giving his friend a beaming grin. We're friends, call me Naruto. Yes. Friends, welcome back Naruto, Gaara replied with a wider smile, taking a seat at his desk. Where have you been? I tried asking Shukaku where Jubi could have taken you, but he hasn't been very helpful. Ah, I've been traveling, getting stronger, meeting new people, you know how it is. Naruto replied, not feeling a need to go into the whole story, it wouldn't really matter much. Well, nevertheless, I'm glad to see that you're okay. Gaara replied, fully aware of that the blonde was leaving something out. To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? Can't a guy just drop in to say hello to a friend? Naruto asked, his tone jokingly serious. Konoha and Suna are still allies, so you must have a reason to risk coming here. Gaara simply stated, face stoic and blank of emotion. Hey, yeah that's true, Naruto chuckled, scratching his cheek sheepishly. I actually came here to talk to the Kazekage. I wasn't aware you were the Kage until I saw you sitting behind the desk. Congratulations again. Thank you. So what is your business with me, Naruto-san? Gaara asked, switching into what Konkuro had dubbed Cage mode. Just here to deliver a message, Kazekage-sama. Naruto replied as he also got serious, hopping off the other's desk. Oh, Gaara asked with a raised brow. And what might that be? I have declared Konoha as my enemy. I have launched the first strike in the coming war. I will destroy that village and there is no one that can stop me. Naruto stated, eyes hard and dangerous. My message to you is to stay out of the coming battle if you value the lives of your citizens. I don't need any backup and help. I simply need you to stay out of it. Gaara narrowed his eyes at that, clearly picking up the subtle threat from his friend. Thank you for the warning. Naruto grinned, switching from dangerously serious to cheerily pleasant. Don't mention it, It's what friends are for after all. You saved me from my darkness, Naruto. I will always support you. Gaara replied, a smile adorning his face once more. I will have to talk to the council though. They are the reason the alliance still stands. It will be difficult to convince them, however. Ah well. Naruto chuckled again, scratching his head sheepishly. You can't really try to convince them that one missing nin is a better ally than a whole hidden village, can you? No, I cannot, Gaara sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. They would most likely ask for my resignation if I were to push the issue. Well then, don't tell them, Naruto summed up with finality. From what Jiraiya told me over a year ago, the Akatsuki has decided to take a 3-year-long break, while Orochimaru needs 3 years between his body swap technique. This gives me a year and a half of free time. Gaara simply quirked a brow at that, motioning for the blonde to continue. I will spend that time making a name for myself in the world, building a reputation and gaining powerful allies, and when the time comes, I'll handle the Akatsuki and Orochimaru. Naruto explained, grinning confidently. That should give you more than enough of an argument to have them at least consider neutrality, if not a full-out alliance. It sounded like a good enough plan to Gaara. He could support his friend and not risk war with Konoha should Naruto fail. It was a bit cold, but he had a village to look out for. Very well, Gaara agreed with a nod. Until then you will remain an enemy of Suna. Hey, that's just fine with me, Naruto replied, reaching into his coat and drawing a tri-pronged kunai. Before I go though, I have something for you. Gaara took the kunai and stared at it, eyes wide as he realized just what it was. This was one of the most famous kunai in the world after all. I recently retrieved my inheritance from Konoha, Naruto explained, causing his friend to look up in shocked understanding. While I may not be able to perform the Flying Thunder God technique just yet, I've already figured out how to make the seals that will send me a signal when activated. Should you ever require my assistance, just throw this kunai and I'll come as fast as I can. It had taken him less than 30 minutes to go over his father's technique notes, less than 10 to rework the signal seal and place it on one of the spare kunai. Theoretically, the seal would send out a signal when thrown, which would allow the receiver to lock onto its position and teleport to it. With his knowledge on seals being non-existent, he had barely been able to make the signal seal using the step-by-step notes and had yet to figure out the reverse summoning seal, which would allow him to travel to the kunai instantly. So he had to stick with using his speed, flying or the black cavity technique. Nodding in reply, Gaara tucked the kunai within his robes, making sure to keep it separate from his other weapons. Thank you, Naruto. I will use it should I require your assistance. Alright then, I'll see you later, Gaara. Naruto replied, vanishing from sight in a blur of instantaneous movement combined with the buzz of static. Looking at the spot where Naruto had just stood a second ago, Gaara sighed and shook his head. Goodbye, my friend, until we meet again. With that he returned to his paperwork, cursing himself for ever accepting this job. The next day, Iwa. Stalking up to the village gate, a large metal construct protecting the hidden stone village, Naruto was stopped by the 2 gate guards. Halt, one called, frowning as he took in Naruto's hair and eyes. State your name and purpose in this village. Namikaze. Naruto here to see the Tsuchikage, he answered, using a name they would definitely recognize. N. Namikaze, as in Namikaze Minato, the yellow flash. One guard asked, paling to a shade normally reserved for a certain snake Sanin. Naruto frowned, hating the relation but requiring the reputation it garnered, especially in Iwa. Yes, he was my father. Dai Namikaze, one of the guards yelled, both jumping over their booth and rushing him. Sighing in annoyance, Naruto vanished and reappeared between the two, his hands whipping out and swatting them away. In a speeding blur, the 2 Iwa nin were sent crashing into the village walls, cracking the stone and losing consciousness. First with Sakura's jaw and now these 2, I really need to limit my strength further. Naruto mused, staring down at his hands. Unlike the last 2 worlds I visited, the people here are fragile. I can't expect them to survive hits that would have been shrugged off by Vegeta or Ulquiorra. Keeping that thought at the back of his mind and returning to his current situation, Naruto turned his attention to the giant gate that stood before him, his thoughts taking a more devious and fun-garnering turn. I might as well bring the cage to me rather than going to him. It will likely save more time and make it easier to convince him. His thoughts decided, Naruto raised an arm and extended a finger, channeling and focusing his ki at the fingertip. Pouring a great amount of dark blue power into the technique, he manipulated it into a ball roughly the size of his head, one that was slowly growing in size as time passed. Once the ball was roughly doubled in size, Naruto flicked his finger, launching the technique at the city gates. Death Ball. In a blur of blue light, the ball of ki struck the gate and slowly began to sink into the metal, melting the nearby material into a thick, gooey sludge. Once half the ball had sunk into the gate, Naruto launched a small blast of ki at it, causing an immediate and terrifying chain reaction. The ball exploded with the force of 1,000 explosive tags, sending massive shock waves throughout the village and knocking over many people close to the gate. Less than 10 seconds after the explosion, the Tsuchikage appeared on a nearby rooftop, a contingent of Jonin, Chunin and Genin appearing around him an instant later. As the dust cleared, they were met with quite the terrifying sight. The massive gates and walls that had protected the village for decades had been completely destroyed, a massive and spacious remaining in their place. Standing on the other end of the crater was a boy that happened to look like a miniature version of their greatest enemy, his hair a golden blonde and his eyes a vibrant blue. "Who are you? What do you want?" the Tsuchikage shouted, his face calm but his eyes burning with rage. He was a very short old man, with a big red nose, triangular beard and angular mustache. Despite his comical appearance, Onoki was an extremely powerful shinobi, one that had gained the title of Onoki of both scales and was regarded as one of the 3 pillars of the shinobi world due to his great power, a title shared by only he, Sarutobi Hiruzen and Salamander Hanzo. "My name is Namikaze Naruto, son of Namikaze Minato." Naruto called back, suppressing his flinch at the claim. His reply seemed to cause a great amount of unease among the Iowa nin, many of them gasping and slipping into their fighting stances, their combined killing intent being brushed off by the blonde. Onoki on the other hand seemed to actually calm down at that, his rage vanishing and his eyes focusing, the man either prepared to speak or battle. "I'm here to talk about an alliance," Naruto added, causing some to blink and growl. "Why would we want to ally with Konoha?" Onoki called back, eyes narrowed in thought. "Not to mention the fact that you destroyed our gate, you are not making a good first impression, Namikaze." In the blink of an eye, the blonde vanished from his spot several dozen meters away and appeared a mere 10 feet from the large group of shinobi, surprising and terrifying many with his impressive speed. Luckily for many Iowa nin, a signal from their cage put a stop to their preemptive strike, saving them from the blonde's retaliatory carnage. "Ah yes, the gate. Well, that was mostly to gain your attention," Naruto replied sheepishly, his grin causing many of the gathered shinobi to growl angrily. It was much like that of his father. "Also, your guards felt the need to attack me when they learned my identity, so I felt that destroying your gate would more than make up for it." That actually drew a small smirk from the elderly cage, the monk's eyes glazing momentarily as he visited a past memory. "You also seem to have misunderstood me," Naruto continued, drawing the cage from his thoughts. "I'm not a Konoha nin. In fact, I actually plan to destroy Konoha and build a new village on its ashes. I have come here to ask that you ally with me when the time comes." This caused a great many to blink and gape in surprise, completely blindsided that the son of the most powerful Hokage sought the destruction of his own village, a village both his parents died to protect. "Why would you seek to destroy your father's village?" Onoki asked, highly curious of the blonde's reasoning. "And if you were able to somehow succeed, why should we ally with you and not take Konoha's land for ourselves?" "My father's." The word was spat out with such venom and malice that a few of the Iowa nin actually recoiled away from the blonde. "Village, as you say, has made me its enemy for reasons I choose not to share, and when I finally destroy them, you will see that I make a far better ally than enemy." Onoki narrowed his eyes at the unspoken threat, seeing the blonde in a slightly new light. "Very well, Namikaze, should you actually succeed in destroying Konoha, I will consider joining with you." Many of the gathered nin began to protest at this point, but a pointed look from their cage, as well as a killing intent-laced chakra spike, was enough to silence them. "A wise decision," Naruto replied, his hand slipping into one of his pockets and causing the various nin to stiffen. "I would like to offer this as an apology for your gate as well as proof of my commitment to our future alliance." With that he slowly withdrew his hand, causing the shinobi to relax as he was holding a simple sealing scroll, a scroll that was soon tossed to the elderly Kage. Onoki simply eyed the scroll warily before handing it to one of his jonin, standard procedure when dealing with neutral and enemy shinobi, who opened it and read. A few seconds passed before the monk's eyes widened, his jaw dropping as he stared at the scroll. It's. He stuttered, unable to complete his sentence due to his immense shock. Get on with it, man. Onoki snapped, highly annoyed at the monk's suspense-building behavior. It's the instructions to the Rasengan, as well as the Yondaime's speed training routine, Tsuchikage-sama. The man shouted, causing all those who heard him to copy his earlier expression. Snatching the scroll away, Onoki stared at it for a few seconds as his men celebrated behind him before turning his attention to the blonde, a wide smile stretching across his face. I look forward to our future alliance, Namikaze-san, Onoki spoke, holding a hand out to the blonde. Naruto immediately took the monk's hand, his grin widening as he shook hands with the power Kage. Please, call me Naruto. Naruto spent a good week in Iwa going over terms with Onoki and the village council, taking time to also give pointers to the many who attempted to learn the Rasengan, which accounted for over 80% of the active shinobi roster. By the end of the week, most Iwa nin were on the second step of learning the technique, but it was slow progress. Most found it difficult to complete the first stage alone. Naruto was quick to calm them, however, as Jiraiya had taken 3 months to master the technique and the Iwa nin were lacking the bonus of a shadow clone's assistance. They were well aware that it would take them quite some time to fully master the Rasengan. In the end, it was decided by the Tsuchikage and the council that they would gladly ally with the blonde. One of their stipulations, however, was that the alliance would only come into effect once Naruto had destroyed Konoha or built his own village. In exchange, they would grant him sanctuary should he ever require it. Past all the legal jargon of the contract, Iwa would basically assist in the financing of his village, as well as lend him several shinobi while the village was still weak. Once the alliance was settled and the village was stabilized, they would switch to a system of tax-less, free trade, with Iwa sending ores and minerals, while Naruto reciprocated with food and lumber, resources that were very abundant in Fire Country. In order to keep the alliance a secret and prevent a war between Iwa and Konoha, it was decided that Naruto would be put in Iwa's bingo book, marked as a criminal and enemy of the state. On Naruto's suggestion, as he was getting incredibly bored with politics, he was set up to fight a battalion of Iwa nin in order to decide his rank. Quite the challenge, as the last man to take on a battalion of Iwa's best had been the Yondaime Hokage himself. This battle would allow Naruto to show off his power, as well as prove once and for all that he had the strength required to take down a hidden village. The battle was quick and gruesome, the blonde blazing through his opponents and marking kill shots in red paint. It took him less than 2 minutes to slaughter them all. 500 of Iwa's best, including Onoki of both scales, all cut down and killed. In a matter of minutes, the blonde definitely lived up to his heritage and bold claims. In the end, he was marked an SS rank threat with a simple, flee on sight order, the second to receive such a ranking in all of Iwa's history, the first being his father. With that display, the citizens of Iwa couldn't help but believe in the blonde's chances. He could actually succeed in bringing down Konoha. This had of course led to much partying and drinking. The next day, the bingo books were sent out and Naruto left Iwa, highly pleased with what he had accomplished. 3 days later, Konoha. For close to 2 weeks after a certain blonde's sudden appearance, Tsunade had spent much of her time arguing with the village council and elders, said blonde being the topic of their many conversations. It was only the revelation of Naruto's heritage and acknowledgement of his power that prevented the updating of his bingo book entry and the release of the Hunter Nin, ending the argument with Tsunade's victory, much to the chagrin of many council members. However, this was the safest option to take. As far as the council was concerned, they couldn't place the son of their beloved Yondaime in the bingo books. What would Iwa do with such information? They were also unable to send Hunter Nin after him. Based on his display a few weeks ago, the team could probably tear those Hunter Nin apart in a matter of seconds, all without breaking a sweat. In the end, they had decided to change his entry from an A- rank threat to be killed on sight to AB rank threat to be captured on sight. It was their hope that someone would be able to defeat and return the wayward Namikaze. A belief that was dashed away only a matter of days later. Tsunade found herself repeating the same actions she'd performed for the last few days, namely holing up in her office and drinking sake, he thoughts revolving around her godson and her plans to gain his forgiveness. It was at this time that Shizune barged in, the younger woman looking terribly flustered and shocked. "Tsunade-sama, you have to see this," Shizune yelled, waving some book around. "Go away, Shizune, I'm not in the mood for more paperwork," Tsunade replied, her head dropping to the desk with a tired groan. "It's about Naruto-kun," Shizune continued undeterred. "He's in Iwa's bingo book." "What? Let me see," Tsunade shouted, leaping to her feet and snatching the book from her assistant, quickly flipping to the back pages. "It's on page 3, Shizune pointed out, greatly shocking Tsunade. Only the highest-ranked threats were placed at the front of the bingo books, and seeing as pages 1 and 2 were simple introductory paragraphs. Flipping to the page, she was shocked to see that it was indeed an entry for Naruto, an image of the boy posted in the top left corner looking exactly as he had a matter of days ago. The entry below the picture did not serve to calm her racing heart. Name: Namikaze Naruto. So they know his real name. Tsunade blanched, horrified that the information had gotten out despite all of her attempts to keep it under wraps. Now the whole world knows of your heritage, Naruto. Rank: SS. That caused her eyes to widen to new lengths. That can't just be because of his father's identity. Onoki is far too smart and sly to hold such a grudge. What have you done, Naruto? Description: age: roughly 13 to 14 years of age. Height: between 5 foot 6 inches and 5 foot 8 inches. Appearance: spiky, blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, usually adorned with a red cloak with black spirals. Wields a sword of unknown make and origin with a strangely shaped hilt. The sword is usually strapped to his waist. Last affiliated village: the village hidden in the leaves. Rank before leaving village: genin. Reason for entry: charged with the destruction of the village gate. Charged with the slaughter of 500 Iwa nin of Chunin and above rank. Charged with the assault and attempted murder on Onoki of both scales, Sandame Tsuchikage. He did what? Tsunade raged, eyes widening as she read the entry. How strong are you, Naruto? To not only defeat a battalion of Iwa nin, but to fight and survive a battle with Onoki, this is no mere feat. Known abilities: extraordinary speed and strength. Capable of an unknown speed technique on par with the Yondaime Hokage's Flying Thunder God and the Yondaime Reikage's Lightning Armor. This unknown technique is only recognized by the sound it leaves behind, a buzz of static. Excellent swordsmanship skills. Expert user of shadow clones. Capable of man-powerful and seal-less jutsu. Recommended course of action: flee on sight, do not engage target if you value your life. Below that was a chart showing an estimation of the blonde's abilities. The genjutsu portion had a question mark while the taijutsu, kenjutsu and ninjutsu portions were off the charts. This was truly an SS rank shinobi. Tsunade read and reread the entry many times before she turned to her desk, activating a seal and summoning of Jiraiya's toads, the creature simply staring at her as it awaited its orders. Find Jiraiya. Tell him to drop everything and find Naruto. I want him protected from Iwa. Tsunade ordered, receiving a salute from the toad before it disappeared in a puff of smoke. Turning to Shizune, Tsunade made a difficult choice. She would have to update their bingo books as well, otherwise Konoha would be made to look like a fool due to their lack of information. Update our bingo books with the information supplied in here, add in anything we may know that they don't, and move him up to S rank with a capture-only reward. Hi Tsunade-sama, Shizune replied, running off to complete her orders. With that finished, Tsunade sank back into her desk and poured another glass of sake, her thoughts continuing their revolution around a certain blonde. Please be safe and return to us, Naruto. Oto, training ground. Boom, crash, crack, growling angrily, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes darted about the training ground, searching for something else to destroy in his rage. He had of course just viewed the newest editions of the various bingo books. Damn it, how did he get so strong? He's been gone all this time and as soon as he pops up he's this powerful. Sasuke ranted, kunai and shuriken flying as he continued venting his anger. No, this can't be the dead last, it must be power from his demon, that must be it. Well, no matter, nothing can stand against the power of Sharingan. I will kill Itachi, then I'm coming for you, Naruto. With Naruto hovering high in the air above a certain training ground, Naruto chuckled as he watched the destruction of the training ground. Sasuke was definitely pissed off today. He had flown straight to Rice Country after leaving Iowa, using his heightened sensing abilities to locate the Uchiha and his powerful mentor. Using Kabuto's form, he then snuck into the base and presented Sasuke with a copy of Iowa's bingo book, enjoying the look on the other teen's face as he read the newest entry. That had been 10 minutes ago. He'd spent the rest of his time watching his ex-best friend venting his anger, silently laughing at the Uchiha from high above. "That's it, Uchiha, train as hard as you can." Naruto chuckled, his eyes sparkling maliciously. "The stronger you are, the harder you'll fall." Sending one last glance at the ground, he spotted Orochimaru exiting the underground village entrance, the Sannin glancing up suspiciously just as Naruto vanished in a blur of movement and sound. "Soon, Snake. Just you wait." Rewritten Chapter 8. Sage. 3 weeks after leaving Iowa, Naruto found himself traveling and training, incorporating his stolen, recovered inheritance into his vast repertoire. Seeing as he had just over a year to accomplish his goals, Naruto decided to travel on foot rather than flying. It would allow him more time to train while making his journey. During the 3-week walk to Kumo, he divided his time between walking and training, walking during the day while his clones trained and spending his nights training and incorporating his clones' knowledge. Despite his power and grand repertoire of techniques, he was highly lacking in jutsu, and the few that he did know were pretty much mastered already, so he was trying to increase his jutsu repertoire. While staying in Iowa, he had been gifted a scroll filled with minor earth manipulation exercises as well as a few C to a rank jutsu. He'd also taken the opportunity to raid Oto's library while in Kabuto's form, claiming a scroll on fire manipulation as well as several high-level gen and ninjutsu scrolls. Heck, he'd even managed to copy some of Orochimaru's personal jutsu. As for his inheritance, his father's belongings had contained several scrolls on wind and lightning manipulation as well as several high-level jutsu, mostly wind and lightning jutsu due to the Yondaime's elemental affinity. His mother's belongings, on the other hand, had been small in number, but he'd managed to collect a few scrolls on water manipulation and some basic jutsu, basic but rare as they were Uzumaki clan techniques. After close to 5 weeks of walking and training, he finally found himself within reach of Lightning Country, the journey taking far longer than he'd expected. With the assistance of a few hundred clones, he was able to quickly master wind and lightning manipulation, an easy task due to his wind affinity and his control over electricity. He'd also managed to master most of the wind and lightning jutsu, his superb control allowing him to recreate Kakashi's 1000 birds and lightning cutter techniques, an accomplishment that had made him cackle in glee as he imagined the looks he would get from his former sensei and teammates when they learned of this. As for the fire, water and earth elements, his abilities at manipulation would be considered adequate at best, requiring further training to fully master. Jutsu-wise, he'd made sure to master at least 5 techniques of each element, giving him some variety and elemental firepower. The last of his training was centered on Orochimaru's jutsu stash, although he chose to discard many of the jutsu due to them being inhumane or too evil for his taste, which included over 80% of the stolen scrolls. The few that he had kept had been mastered or reworked as much as he could manage, increasing his variety and power. The first technique was the Hidden Shadow Snake Hands, a technique that allowed the user to launch small summoned snakes from their sleeves or wrists depending on their mastery of the technique. Lacking the snake summoning contract, he'd remade the jutsu using his shapeshifting ability, turning it into a powerful technique with many uses. Rather than launching snakes from his sleeves, he would instead launch many child-sized, shadowy black, razor-sharp clawed hands, which would claw and grasp at his foe in an attempt to rip and tear them to shreds. He'd gotten the idea from his experience with the gate, knowing how terrifying and intimidating those little hands could be, all from first-hand experience unfortunately. In honor of the original technique and for the look of horror and shock it would bring to Orochimaru's face, he'd named the technique Hidden Shadow Claws. The second technique was named the Many Hidden Shadow Snake Hands, which allowed the user to launch a greater amount of larger snakes, a much more powerful version of the Hidden Shadow Snake Hands. After mastering the jutsu, he'd reworked it into his clawed version and named it the Multiple Hidden Shadow Claws, increasing the number and size of the shadowy claws. The rest of the techniques were of the same manner, involving the use of snakes to accomplish many things, including attacking enemies and healing the user. A few of these he had no use for but had kept because of the great shock value, such as the gathering of the snake's technique, the body shedding technique and the formation of 10,000 snakes technique. Other than training and walking, he spent much of his travel time destroying bandit camps, saving villages and fighting off bounty hunters, using his new techniques to do so. The bounty hunters had come as a bit of surprise. He hadn't actually expected anyone to try and take down such a powerful target, but his name had spread far and wide and many were after the reward on his head. Luckily, after wiping out a camp of 300 bandits with a final flash and then proceeding to beat down the many bounty hunters who had thought to attack him while he was weakened, he'd proven that he deserved his fearsome reputation and only the strongest of hunters bothered him now. An hour's walk away from the border of Bear and Lightning countries, passing through the border town of Kumakabu, Naruto felt a familiar chakra signature approaching his location. Deciding to not meet the owner in the village, he took off towards the forest, blurring through the village and appearing in a clearing several miles outside of the village. He was only forced to wait a few minutes before the chakra signature reached him, the owner moving at speeds comparable to his own, while he was still sealed at least. Eyes locked on the figure's form, Naruto frowned. He'd so hoped for a nice and event-free day. "What do you want, Jiraiya?" Naruto asked, preparing himself for what would likely be an exciting battle. "Naruto, I've been looking for you all over the continent." Jiraiya sighed, smiling cheerfully despite the look on his former apprentice's face. "Tsunade sent me to protect you from Iwa and to bring you back to Konoha where you'll be safe." Naruto chuckled at that, highly amused at Tsunade's offer. "Did you fail to read the bingo book entry, Jiraiya?" Naruto asked, quirking a curious brow in question. "I can take care of myself. You and your village can no more protect me than you can protect yourselves." "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, Naruto." Jiraiya sighed, slipping into a fighting stance and spiking his chakra threateningly. "But as a ninja of Konohagakure I must complete my duty. You'll have to come with me, Naruto." A smirk replacing his frown, Naruto straightened up and did some stretches, his own chakra spiking and brushing against the Sannin's aura. "I was hoping you would say that, Jiraiya. You have something I want and this is a perfect opportunity to take it." Before Jiraiya could ask what he meant, Naruto rocketed towards him at high speeds, his fist aimed at the older Mon's face. Dodging the blow, Jiraiya countered with a punch to the blonde's torso, but the blow was caught, the teen spinning on his heel and flipping the Sannin over his shoulder and onto the ground, hard. The force of the attack actually caused the Sannin to bounce, a series of cracks resounding throughout the clearing as several of his bones broke, blood spraying from his mouth as he gasped in pain. A moment later, the Sannin dissolved into mud, a second Jiraiya rushing towards Naruto from the forest, a low-power spiraling sphere in his hand. The powered-down technique hit Naruto square in the back, causing him to go flying into a tree, the technique carving spirals into his back. As soon as he impacted with the tree, Naruto exploded into many blades of wind, slicing and reducing the tree to dust. "Wind clone," Jiraiya realized, eyes darting about in search of the blonde. He must have learned it from his father's notes. Hopefully he doesn't know the Flying Thunder God yet, or this will be much harder than I thought. Feeling a rumble through the ground, Jiraiya leapt away as Naruto burst from the ground, his blade swiping through the Sannin's previous location. Turning towards the airborne Sannin, Naruto reared back his arm and made a punching motion towards Jiraiya, grinning inwardly as he saw the widening of the Sannin's eyes. Hidden shadow claws. From within his cloak sleeves, 6 dozen shadowy hands shot towards the Sannin, clawing and grasping for the Sannin's limbs. As the attack approached, Jiraiya snapped out of his shock at seeing the copy of his former teammate's signature technique and flew through a set of hand seals, his chakra pooling in and saturating his long mane of hair. Needle Jizo. Jiraiya's hair lengthened before wrapping around his frame, turning into thousands of needles that jutted out from his frame, completely covering and protecting him. In a poof of smoke, the shadow hands were skewered and dispelled, Jiraiya landing safely and turning towards his wayward student. "That was similar to Orochimaru's technique. Where did you learn it?" the Sannin asked, eyes narrowed in suspicion and thought. "Not that it matters or anything," Naruto replied, waving a hand nonchalantly. "But I snuck into his village and raided his library, including his private collection." Jiraiya's eyes widened in shock at that announcement. He had been trying for over a decade to locate Orochimaru's main base and had yet to have any luck. How had Naruto found it? Deciding to ask later, he prepared to end the fight, his hands blurring through another set of hand seals. Needle hell. In an instant, his mane of hair snapped forward, thousands of rigid hair strands shooting towards the blonde. Despite its impressive capabilities, the attack was completely ineffective, the needles simply bouncing off of the blonde's impenetrable skin and dropping to the floor. Regardless of its apparent failure, the technique had served its true purpose, it had bought Jiraiya the time he needed. Time to end this, Naruto. Jiraiya muttered, his bleeding hands flying through a set of hand seals and slamming into the ground. Summoning technique. There was a large puff of smoke, fully hiding the clearing from sight before a gust of wind blew it away, revealing Jiraiya's summon, Gamabunta, chief summon of the Toad clan. What? Jiraiya, why have you summoned me? The Toad boss bellowed, his brow furrowed as he puffed on his pipe. Look down, Bunta, Jiraiya answered, his tone low and solemn. Looking down, Gamabunta searched around until he saw a familiar mop of blonde hair in the clearing below, the owner glancing up at him a moment later. Naruto Gamabunta asked, his tone low and soft as well. Sorry about this kid, but Jiraiya has seniority as our summoner, come quietly so I don't have to hurt you. It's all right, Bunta, I understand. Naruto shouted at the Toad, subtly slicing his finger and smearing blood on his hands. You're bound by a contract after all. Will you come quietly, Naruto? Jiraiya asked, hoping the blonde would surrender rather than facing a summon boss on his own. None of the other Toads will fight Bunta since he's the boss, you can't win, just sir. Summoning technique. Dragon King. While Jiraiya had been speaking, Naruto had used the opportunity to release his limiter seals, allowing him to draw on the power required to form and solidify a creature the size of Gamabunta. As the smoke from the summoning cleared, Jiraiya and Gamabunta felt their jaws drop in shock, staring stupidly at the creature the blonde had summoned. Standing before them, Naruto perched on its head, was a large, bipedal, mythical beast. A dragon. The creature towered over Gamabunta by at least 10 meters, the horns on its head adding to the overall height and granting it a fierce appearance. It was covered from head to toe in large, gray-tinted scales, while the neck, chest and underbelly were formed of some sort of light orange carapace. It had 2 large claws on each hand and foot, with an incredibly long, barbed tail that stretched out far behind it, one that was swinging about in preparation. On its back were 2 large, bone wings with claws on the joints and a reddish-orange membrane to allow flight. As they finished taking in the creature's appearance, the dragon reared its head back and let loose an earth-shattering roar. Grar. Kumo. Seated behind his opulent desk, the Yondaime Raikage of Kumogakure, was suddenly distracted from his battle with paperwork by the timely intervention of Naruto's summon. Turning to his window, he channeled chakra to his eyes in order to increase his vision and was just able to make out the shape of 2 large creatures in the distance. Either there was a Biju out there or 2 summoners were in the middle of a battle. Turning to one of his messengers, he gave a precise order. Whether it was a summoned creature of tailed beast, there was only one way to deal with this. Find Yugito and tell them to meet me at the gates. Hi Raikage-sama, the Chunin shouted, disappearing with a quick body flicker. Observing the shocked look on both Jiraiya and Gamabunta's faces, it took all of Naruto's willpower and several of his absorbed personality traits to keep from breaking out in laughter. Meet my boss summon, Bahamut, King of Dragons and Lord of the Sky. Naruto announced grandly, his hands spread out at his sides and a wide grin on his face. What the hell? Jiraiya whispered, his brow furrowed in confusion. There's no such thing as a dragon contract, how did he get one? Look closer, Jiraiya, it has the same eyes as Naruto. Gamabunta pointed out, noticing the red diamond that had appeared in the eyes of both summoner and creature. That's not a summon, it's a simple chakra construct manifested by his power. What? Naruto doesn't have a bloodline, is that another gift from the Jubi? Jiraiya asked, noticing the appearance of a dojutsu in the blonde's eyes. And how is that even possible? The amount of chakra he would need to create that is well above cage level. I know he's always had huge reserves, but that's just impossible. Meh, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, pulling impossibilities out my ass is my forte. Naruto chuckled, clearly hearing the Sanin's whispered words. I don't know about the eyes, but the technique is well within his capabilities. Gamabunta replied, ignoring the blonde's comment. His reply simply gained him a confused look from Jiraiya. Can't you feel it? I suppose not. It's too well concealed for you to notice without using Sage Mode. Notice what? Jiraiya asked, focusing on Naruto in search of something he may have missed. His chakra, Gamabunta replied, taking another puff of his pipe. While he's very good at hiding and concealing his power, it's almost impossible to hide from a user of natural chakra. I can easily sense his chakra reserves. Even though some of it is being restrained by some type of seal, he has as much chakra as a tailed beast. I would put him somewhere around the 7 tails in raw power. Jiraiya gasped at that, his mind trying to comprehend the sheer levels of chakra the blonde held. 7 tails worth of chakra was the equivalent of 24 cage-level shinobi. How is that even possible? How did his reserves increase so drastically? Jiraiya wondered, trying to recall how much chakra the blonde had contained at their meeting over a year ago. He's only been gone a year and 4 months. He was brought out of his thoughts by Gamabunta jumping back, the toad avoiding a dangerous tail swipe from the dragon-shaped construct. Don't forget about me, old man, Naruto shouted, urging his summon forwards. Gamabunta continued hopping around, dodging the dragon's furious swipes while trying to land a hit with his blade, his massive tanto bouncing off the dragon's armored hide to no effect. As the two beasts clashed, Naruto and Jiraiya would exchange attacks, the blonde using his ki blasts while Jiraiya defended and retaliated with different ninjutsu. This continued for several minutes until Gamabunta found an opening, allowing him to get in close enough for Jiraiya to jump, the toad Sannin leaping towards Naruto with a super great ball spiraling sphere in his hand. Naruto was forced to drop down from his summon in order to avoid the attack, a wise choice as the chakra sphere exploded on contact, expanding and reducing the dragon's head to a bloody stump while flinging Jiraiya back onto Gamabunta's head. The three stood there transfixed as blood, meat and brain matter went flying in all directions, announcing the death of the massive summon. Rather than dispelling, however, the summon remained standing, the top portion of its body simply missing. Strangely enough, Naruto found that he could still feel the section of his soul anchored to the dragon was still alive. Testing out a hunch, he tried pouring more chakra into the headless body, channeling a large portion of his power into the beast's body. In a burst of blood and gore, the dragon was fully healed, its brains, skull and flesh fully regenerating in an instant, Naruto returning to his spot atop its head. Interesting, as long as my soul remains in the body it won't dispel. This has gone further than a regular summoning technique, Naruto realized, grinning at the looks of surprise and shock on his opponents' faces. Damn it, Jiraiya, at this rate we'll lose. What do we do? Gamabunta asked, his tone tired and weak. Let's try causing continuous damage, give me some oil bunta, Jiraiya ordered, already flying through hand seals. Hearing the command, Gamabunta leapt into the sky, his hands forming a seal as his mouth inflated and his cheeks puffed out. Overhearing Jiraiya's plan, Naruto formed a counterattack and relayed his plans to his summon, projecting a clear image through their mental connection. As Gamabunta released his oil and Jiraiya prepared to set it aflame, Bahamut reared back its head and released a ball of purple flames, aiming directly for the stream of oil. With a mighty flare, the oil was ignited, the flames quickly running up the stream and following it back to its source, causing the Toad Chief to dispel before he could end the stream. Jiraiya's scream echoed throughout the area, the Sannin plummeting to the ground covered in a thick layer of violet fire. Seeing the surrounding forest set ablaze by the flailing Sannin, Naruto ran through a set of hand seals, performing one of his mother's original jutsu to counteract the mighty flames. Uzumaki's secret technique, Grand Meteor Shower. As the name suggested, the jutsu caused the water in the air to form several boulder-sized orbs of water, orbs that rained down from the sky, exploding on contact with the ground and effectively putting out the flames. With that done, he dispelled his summon and made his way towards the Toad Sannin's last location, knowing full well that Jiraiya had survived his fall in the fire. He arrived to find Jiraiya laying in a small crater. The Sannin was covered in several burns and cuts, his right arm and leg were broken and he had lost consciousness. Kneeling next to the man, Naruto began his absorption process, draining some blood and chakra from Jiraiya. Standing up, he frowned down at the body, trying to decide what to do about Jiraiya. Be glad that I want you to live until the village is burned down, Naruto muttered, summoning a toad-shaped construct the size of a wagon. Placing Jiraiya on the toad, he gave it plenty of chakra and sent it towards Konoha, the creature hopping away with a croak. Turning away from the disappearing summon, Naruto headed off towards Kumo at a sedate pace, leaving the devastated forest behind. Naruto had been walking for several minutes before he felt 3 large chakra signatures approaching his position, 3 large and extremely powerful signatures at that. Landing in a clearing a few miles from the approaching shinobi, he leant back against a tree with his arms crossed and waited, allowing a portion of his power to be sensed by the approaching nin. Several seconds later, 3 people entered the clearing from the forest. He recognized them as the Raikage and Kumo's 2 Jinchuriki. Well, it seems we have a missing nin in our territory. The Raikage spoke, his tone deep and gruff. What do you want, Namikaze? Greetings, Raikage-sama, Naruto greeted, bowing politely and smiling. I was on my way to Kumo to meet with you before I had a small run-in with Jiraiya of the Sannin. I'm sure our battle is what drew your presence here. You fought Jiraiya. Is he still around here? The Kunoichi asked Yugito-ni if he remembered correctly. No, miss, Naruto began, pretending to not know her name, just as he had done with Harabel. Yugito-ni, she supplied, looking a bit surprised. She was quite famous as the Nibi's vessel after all. Ah, a beautiful name for a beautiful woman. Naruto replied with a smile, causing her to blush lightly. No, he is no longer here. I defeated him several minutes ago and had him transported to Konoha as a message. Be that as it may, why should I speak with you, boy? The Raikage cut in, brow furrowed thoughtfully. Your father and village did quite a number on us during the war. Give me a good reason not to just kill you and collect on the reward. Naruto shrugged at that, looking unbothered by the direct threat from a cage-level shinobi. Because, as I'm sure your 2 companions will tell you, you can't win. Isn't that correct, Yugito-ni, vessel of the 3-tailed monster cat and killer bee, vessel of the 9-tailed giant ox? That caused them to stiffen, their eyes widening in a mix of shock and surprise. They had yet to inform anyone of the Biju's rise in power, and with the other vessels being the secretive Kazekage, the insane Mizukage, and a couple of missing nin, word had yet to spread about it. Yo bro, how'd you know? B rapped, his expression completely serious. Naruto gave him an amused smile before replying. You're speaking to the former vessel of the 10-tailed demon fox, he explained, causing their eyes to widen even further. Wait, former? Yugito asked, her face scrunching up in confusion. Naruto found it kind of cute, but he chose to keep that to himself. I'm sure you all felt a large energy surge a few months ago, correct? He asked, receiving a trio of nods from the Kumo nin. That was me releasing the Jubi. How are you still alive then? I asked, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Unsealing the beast should have killed you. I have my ways. Naruto grinned, much to the annoyance of the short-tempered cage. A growled in his annoyance and made to leap forward, but he was stopped by B, his younger brother, grabbing him by the shoulder and preventing him from dashing forward. He turned towards his brother angrily, snarling and spiking his chakra, but he simply received a stern look in reply. Listen up, bro. Fighting's a no-go. The dark-skinned Jinchuriki rapped quietly. He may act like a clown, but Kyuubi says not to throw down. You should stand down as well, kitten. That boy is very powerful. The Sanbi informed her host, drawing Yugito's attention from the arguing brothers. I can sense that he has far more chakra than I do. How is that possible, Neko-chan? Yugito asked, her tone clearly conveying her shock at that statement. Tailed beasts had a lot of chakra. I am not sure, but he is quite powerful. He would make a fine mate for you. Neko purred, her tone changing from cautionary advising to sensual teasing. What? He's like 5 years younger than me. Yugito replied with a blush. Sanbi was always trying to get her to select a mate. Age shouldn't matter when you're a ninja. Sanbi purred in reply, making some amount of sense. You should hurry before someone else snatches him up, kitten. Ignoring the demon's teasing, she added her own opinion to the argument between the Raikage and his brother. Neko says the same. That boy has even more chakra than she does. It would be a difficult battle. Hearing this, the Raikage decided to listen to his 2 best jonin. He would restrain himself, for now. All right, Namikaze, what do you want to speak about? I asked, turning his attention to the smirking blonde. And so Naruto proceeded to inform them about his plans for Konoha, his agreement with Iwa and Suna, his goals and plans regarding Orochimaru and the Akatsuki. At the end of his explanation, the Raikage invited him to the village, giving him a chance to repeat his offer to the council. Should we agree to this alliance, what do you have to offer, Kumo? One of the councillors asked, eyes narrowed shrewdly. We have our own mines, forests and farmlands, what do you have to offer that we cannot acquire ourselves? I'll offer you the one thing Kumo has always wanted, the Byakugan. Naruto replied, enjoying the looks on all their faces. You would just hand over a Hyuga from your village? Another councillor asked, leaning forward as he spoke. No, Naruto replied, earning frowns from the many people in the room. Then what? The Raikage snapped, losing interest in the politics of the situation. When my siege begins, I will save those that I hold no grudge against, this includes the Hyuga branch family. Naruto explained, drawing the interest of the council. They will need a new home, somewhere to rebuild their clan and grow stronger, this can be that home. Whispers spread throughout the room, the council growing excited at receiving not just one Hyuga but several dozen of them, an entire clan of trained Byakugan wielders rather than having to build their own from scratch. My offer is not one Hyuga but over 100 of them. Naruto continued, bringing an end to the excited whispers. I'll also give you my notes on how to remove the caged bird seal, allowing you to earn the full loyalty and gratitude of the branch Hyuga. By now many of the councillors had large grins plastered on the faces, there was no way they could possibly refuse. You have a deal, Namikaze, now let's discuss terms, the Raikage announced, smiling for the first time since meeting the blonde. After a few hours of deliberation, the contract was finalized. Naruto would deliver the Hyugas to Kumo and they would assist him in the building and defending of his village. Kumo would also forward a portion of their missions towards him, allowing the new village to quickly build up its reputation and funds. Once the treaty was signed and finalized, the blonde found himself dragged to the nearest bar by the Raikage and B, the two having planned a night of celebrating and partying. Hours into the partying, they were joined by Yugito and Team Samui, a drunk Naruto enjoying himself by flirting with Yugito, Samui and Karui. Naruto spent roughly a month in Kumo, training and partying with his new friends. It was quite an enjoyable place as far as he was concerned. This had also served to increase his hatred of Konoha. Hanging around with the other vessels had shown him the kind of life he could have led, the kind of life he should have led. In Kumo, demon vessels were worshipped and revered, they were treated like the heroes they were for their sacrifice. Kumo was a wonderful place to live as demon vessel. On to the subject of his training, he had managed to complete his elemental manipulation exercises, making him a master of the 5 elements. He had also mastered all of the jutsu in his stolen, recovered scrolls as well as a few new lightning jutsu that his new friends had taught him. In exchange he had taught them his versions of the 1000 birds and the lightning cutter, both of which had been added to Kumo's jutsu library. Once the month came to a close, he informed the Raikage that he would be leaving, suggesting that they follow Iwa's lead and place him in the bingo book. Of course that had led to a demanding a spar, the Raikage looking to fight such a powerful opponent and test the claims of his bingo book entry. Wanting to garner some fun out the battle, Naruto negotiated with the cage so that he would fight Team Samui and the Raikage together, followed with a fight against both demon hosts. The battle had been quite fun for the blonde. A mix of ninjutsu and kenjutsu against Team Samui with some high-speed taijutsu against the Raikage, Naruto choosing to match them in their own specialties before deciding to end it. After 2 hours of slinging around jutsu and exchanging blows, he began utilizing many of his other abilities, employing his speed techniques and several high-level genjutsu. With a series of lightning-fast strikes, he defeated Team Samui, rendering them all unconscious before turning his full attention to the Raikage. The battle against A was over in a flash, Naruto cheating and turning the Mon's lightning release armor against him, resulting in a painful electrocution until he passed out. After that came the fight with Yugito and B, both vessels choosing to immediately use their demon forms after the display of his skills, knowing that they would require their full strength if they wanted to stand an inkling of a chance. Summoning Bahamut to hold off B, Naruto focused his attention on Yugito's flaming form, quickly defeating her with his speed and the use of several of his mother's more powerful water techniques. Once Yugito was defeated, he struck at B with a royal hollow flash, one so powerful that it not only knocked B out of demon form, but also vaporized a mountain behind the man. That feat had easily gained him the SS rank in the Kumo Bingo books. With his mission completed and his goal accomplished, he soon left Kumo and headed towards the last of the great ninja villages, the village hidden in the mist. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.